The story began with several buildings engulfed in flames. This was the Young Merchant Guild, officially recognized as the wealthiest and most powerful merchant organization in the entire Central Plains. At least, it had been until that night, when the entire guild was reduced to a mountain of smoldering ashes. The destruction was no accident, nor was it the result of a business dispute gone wrong. It was a deliberate and merciless assault carried out by the infamous demonic cult. Amid the burning ruins, the guild master sat on the floor, covered in blood and surrounded by masked executioners. The cult leader looked down at him and remarked that, for a mere merchant, he possessed an annoyingly strong sense of justice. He demanded the key to a highly secured wooden box resting nearby. The guild master only sneered in response. He mocked the cultists, asking whether they truly took him for an idiot. According to him, they were the real fools. Without the key, they could never open the box, and any attempt to force it open would instantly destroy its contents. Growing impatient, the cult leader's eye began to glow with a sinister pink light. It was a powerful mind control technique. The guild master immediately felt an overwhelming pressure invade his mind. His jaw twitched uncontrollably, moving against his will until he was forced to reveal that the key was hidden beneath his chair. With a casual wave of the cult leader's hand, one of the cultists searched through the wreckage and quickly retrieved the shining brass key. The cult leader examined the box and soon realized that even with the key, the mechanism inside was far too complex for him to handle. Turning back to the immobilized merchant, he mockingly suggested that he might as well finish the task himself since he had already surrendered everything else. Using dark sorcery, the cult leader forced the merchant's body to move. Against his will, the guild master's hands grabbed the key and inserted it into the lock. Inside his mind, he cursed the Martial Arts Alliance leader who had assured him that the box was impossible to open and completely safe from thieves. Apparently, even the finest ancient security systems were useless when facing a sorcerer. A click echoed through the room. The box opened. A brilliant blue light burst forth from within, illuminating the surrounding ruins. Nestled inside the silk-lined interior was a single legendary elixir pill. The guild master's stomach sank. The demonic cult had massacred his entire guild for the sake of a single pill. While he was processing the realization, the cult leader pressed a sword against his throat. Rather than begging for mercy, the merchant attempted to negotiate. He tried to buy his life with money, but the cult leader made it clear that wealth meant nothing to them. At that moment, the merchant smiled. A glowing blue orb rested inside his mouth. Before anyone could stop him, he bit down on the legendary pill. A violent crackle of energy erupted around him. The cult leader's composure shattered instantly. Panicking, he swung his sword and cleanly severed the merchant's head from his shoulders. The head bounced across the wooden floor. Everything went dark. Then, in the very next instant, the merchant awoke with a terrified scream. He sat upright in a bed, clutching his neck and frantically checking whether his head was still attached. It was. Confused and disoriented, he struggled to understand how a dead merchant had somehow ended up alive inside a teenager's bedroom. Before he could make sense of anything, a loud scream echoed across the peaceful mountains of the Wudong sect. The bedroom door burst open. A stern middle-aged man strode inside carrying a thick bamboo stick. He immediately began berating a lazy secular disciple for sleeping in. The young merchant looked up. His mind froze. Standing before him was Taoist Chong Hyan, his old instructor from more than 30 years ago. Before he could process the impossible sight, Chong Hyan swung the bamboo stick. The blow landed squarely on his head. He crashed to the floor, rubbing the painful lump forming on his skull while trying to determine whether he was trapped inside an unusually vivid dream. More than 3 decades had passed since he had been a low-ranking secular disciple at Wudong. He distinctly remembered being expelled shortly after the upcoming evaluation. Yet Hyan stood before him looking exactly as he had back then. Before he could dwell on the mystery, something even stranger appeared. A glowing bamboo slip materialized in front of his face. It floated silently in the middle of the room. Hyan walked directly past it without even noticing it, making it clear that he was the only one capable of seeing it. Focusing on the floating text, he discovered that it was some sort of mystical system shop. The bamboo slip displayed extraordinary abilities such as clairvoyance and martial bone, but their prices were outrageously expensive. Then he noticed a beginner's option. Agile movement. Cost 3 copper coins. He immediately looked up at his furious teacher and, with the most innocent expression he could manage, politely asked to borrow exactly 3 copper coins. The veins on Hyan's forehead bulged. A second later, another powerful strike from the bamboo stick echoed throughout the mountain. Several days passed. Sitting beneath a clear blue sky, the young merchant chewed on a blade of grass and slowly came to terms with his situation. He had truly traveled 30 years into the past. He was once again his younger, useless self. Thinking back, he remembered the pill he had swallowed before his death. It had been called the Divine Demon Pill. Any medicine capable of tearing a soul from a dying body and sending it 30 years into the past was undoubtedly genuine. While reflecting on that fact, a simple but brilliant idea struck him. If he never obtained the Divine Demon Pill in this timeline, then the demonic cult would have no reason to attack his future guild. There would be no massacre. There would be no tragedy. He did not need to devote his life to martial arts. Instead, he could use his knowledge of the future to become the richest merchant in history. His train of thought was interrupted when a cheerful classmate approached and asked why he was slacking off on evaluation day. The young merchant narrowed his eyes, searching his memory. Then he remembered. John Oh-soo, the future heir of the powerful Wuhan money house family. A friend whose background alone was practically a cheat code. He shrugged and remarked that there was little point in trying. Secular disciples like them would never become main disciples anyway. He pointed toward a pair of disciples practicing nearby and questioned whether what they were doing could even be called martial arts training. John glanced over and laughed. If that was Tai Chi, then a street thug's brawl qualified as a supreme martial technique. He sat down beside his friend and looked at the collection of grass whistles scattered nearby. Curious, he asked what all the grass whistles were for. Our hero, Mook Wai-young, explained that the grass whistles were for the main disciples. While secular disciples attended training largely to build connections, the young monks of the main mountain lived entirely different lives. Especially among the current Mayung generation, the disciples had spent their entire lives training in martial arts. Having little exposure to ordinary entertainment, they would undoubtedly be fascinated by something as simple as a grass whistle. John Oh-soo remarked that Mook possessed a remarkable talent for business. Hearing that, Mook reflected on his memories of the future. If he remembered correctly, John would eventually become the head of the Wuhan money house. They had never become close in his previous life because he had been expelled after only a month, but building a good relationship now certainly could not hurt. To test the product, John placed one of the grass whistles to his lips and played a beautiful melody. He enjoyed it so much that he immediately handed over 3 copper coins to purchase one for Mook. After waving goodbye, he left Mook sitting there with exactly the amount of money he needed. A greedy smile spread across Mook's face. Holding up the 3 copper coins, he summoned the floating bamboo slip and focused on the agile movement skill. The coins suddenly dissolved into sparkling golden dust. A message appeared before him. Purchase complete. He clenched his fist, expecting a dramatic surge of power, but felt absolutely no different. Before he could complain about being cheated by a magical bamboo scroll, a loud scream echoed through the courtyard. Turning toward the commotion, he noticed one of the secular disciples who had been practicing Tai Chi earlier clutching his injured wrist in pain. The injury had been inflicted by one of the young elite inner disciples. The boy mocked him, demanding to know how those pathetic movements could possibly be called Tai Chi Chuan. He threatened to break both of the secular disciples' arms. The injured disciple responded with equal hostility, daring the boy to try. The moment the challenge left his mouth, the young disciple moved with startling speed and twisted his opponent's arm. Although pain shot through his body, the secular disciple could only grit his teeth as he realized how overwhelming the difference in skill truly was. The young disciple sneered and questioned how a mere secular disciple could ever hope to defeat a main disciple before threatening to snap his arm immediately. At that moment, Mook approached with a friendly smile. Introducing himself as a secular disciple named Mook Wai-young, he politely suggested that the boy release his friend so they could have a conversation. The young disciple found the request ridiculous, and stated that talking could wait until after he broke the arm. Mook moved closer and casually admitted that he did not particularly care what happened to the injured disciple. However, before any further decisions were made, he wanted to show them a very special item he happened to be selling. Under the bright sunlight of the Wudang Mountains, a clear whistle suddenly echoed through the air. High above the courtyard, a figure dressed in elegant blue robes paused upon hearing the sound. Stepping closer to the edge of a cliffside path, he looked down toward the area where the disciples are gathered. Below, Mook blew into a grass whistle. Although he quickly realized that reproducing the beautiful melody John had played was far more difficult than expected, his clumsy performance proved more than sufficient. The group of young disciples stared at him with sparkling eyes, utterly captivated. The disciple who had injured the secular disciple earlier introduced himself as Myung Kyung and eagerly asked whether they could try the whistle. Meanwhile, the injured secular disciple quietly retreated from the scene. Mook immediately refused. He explained that once a product touched someone's lips, it became second-hand merchandise and lost value. Kyung seemed genuinely troubled by this revelation. Before the boy could finish speaking, Mook showed a brand new grass whistle and flashed a dazzling merchant's smile. He explained that the demonstration model was different. Although the normal price was 5 coins, he was willing to sell this one for the bargain price of 3 coins. The excitement vanished from the disciples' faces. Awkward expressions replaced their earlier enthusiasm. Mook found himself thoroughly confused. This reaction was nothing like what he had expected. Quickly changing tactics, he announced a special bulk purchase discount for anyone willing to buy 5 at once. Kyung nervously admitted that none of them actually carried money. He asked whether they could buy the whistles on credit or perhaps trade something else instead. The other disciples looked equally distressed. Mook could only sigh. It suddenly occurred to him that children who spent all day training in remote mountain sects were unlikely to carry spending money. In truth, money had never been his primary goal anyway. His real objective was establishing relationships with future main mountain disciples. Having teased them enough, he finally relented. He offered to give one away for free. Kyung's face immediately brightened. With great respect, Mook knelt and presented the whistle as a gift, explaining that it was an honor to offer something to the main mountain disciples of the Wudang sect. Kyung puffed out his chest proudly and praised Mook for understanding proper respect. He reached out to accept the gift. As he did, Mook silently recalled the future. Kyung would eventually become one of Wudang's most famous masters, known throughout the Jianghu as the Tai Chi Peerless Sword. Unless history changed dramatically, that future still awaited him. Forming a connection now seemed like an excellent investment. Suddenly, a sharp flash cut through the air. A sword sliced cleanly through the grass whistle before it could change hands. A cold voice demanded to know who dared distract his disciples with such worthless objects. Mook narrowed his eyes. Judging by the robes, the newcomer appeared to belong to the same Chong generation as Chong Hyan. He was likely the master responsible for the young disciples. Inwardly, Mook complained about martial artists and their tendency to solve everything through intimidation. He could not understand why they treated everything unrelated to martial arts as vulgar nonsense. Even the nearby children seemed frightened for no reason. Letting out an exasperated sigh, Mook asked whether enjoying a little music truly constituted a crime. The master's eyes narrowed dangerously. He demanded to know exactly what Mook had just said. Without backing down, Mook calmly quoted an old saying. The eyes wavered, the hand drew the bow, and the heart doubted the shot, yet the target itself never moved. He argued that if a perfected one already understood the truth of such matters, then a small distraction should hardly matter. The master fell silent. His gaze settled on the severed grass whistle lying on the stone floor. Then his expression darkened. A roaring blue aura exploded from his body. The pressure crushed the surrounding air and spread throughout the area. With a cold voice, he remarked that Mook possessed quite the silver tongue and questioned whether those words should be interpreted as an insult to the rules of the Wudang sect. With his entire body trembling beneath the overwhelming pressure, Mook realized that the master was genuinely using internal energy against him. Despite the fear coursing through his body, he quickly concluded that it was merely an intimidation tactic. No matter how proud or arrogant the Wudang sect might be, they would never kill someone over such a trivial matter. Refusing to retreat, he clasped his hands together and boldly declared that a tree could never block the path of the wind and that he only prayed he would not break. The moment those words left his mouth, the crushing pressure disappeared. Instead of growing angrier, the master burst into hearty laughter. He praised Mook's spirit, commending him for standing firm against the weight of his aura. Although he maintained a calm expression, Mook could not help but inwardly acknowledge that there was a very good reason his insides had felt as though they were being turned upside down. Still smiling, the master reached into his robes and decided that a grass flute was a harmless enough pastime. He announced that he would purchase every flute and asked for the total price. Mook quickly calculated the amount and informed him that 15 flutes would cost 75 coins. The master immediately pointed out that Mook had previously mentioned a bulk purchase discount. Without missing a beat, Mook replied with a merchant's smile that the discount applied only to children. Surely a perfected one of the Wudang sect would not lower himself to paying a child's price. The master laughed again, openly amused by the boy's shameless greed. Calling him a cheeky youngster, he provided a crisp banking slip worth 100 coins and handed it over, telling him to keep the remaining amount as compensation for enduring the pressure test. Mook accepted the payment with great satisfaction. As he stared at the money, he could not help but conclude that 25 extra coins was a very reasonable reward for having his life flash before his eyes. Nearby, the young disciples happily played their newly acquired grass flutes. After pocketing the payment, Mook politely introduced himself and asked for the master's Taoist name. The master seemed surprised that the boy genuinely did not recognize him. He revealed that his name was Changhua. The revelation stunned Mook. He immediately recognized the name. Changhua was known throughout the Wudang sect as the Peerless Divine Sword. He was one of the 5 strongest masters currently within the sect and would eventually rise to become one of the legendary 8 venerables. The realization left Mook speechless. Forcing himself to remain respectful, he quickly expressed his honor at meeting such a famous figure. Inwardly, however, he regretted every stubborn word he had spoken. Hua seemed to notice his reaction and teasingly asked whether he finally understood who he had been acting tough toward. Mook calmly replied that he understood perfectly. However, just as the Wudang sect followed the way of the Tao, a merchant was obligated to follow the way of the merchant. The answer only amused Hua further. Thoroughly entertained by the boy's refusal to compromise, he shook his head, gathered his disciples, and departed while remarking that Mook truly refused to give even a single inch. Once the master was gone, Mook released a long sigh of relief and wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. His moment of peace did not last long. Another secular disciple approached and expressed admiration for Mook bold enough to speak so freely to the Peerless Divine Sword. The moment Mook heard the voice, his expression darkened. He immediately recognized the person. Standing before him was a fat, bald young man who introduced himself as Sagong Hyan of the Sungro clan. The sight of him instantly revived unpleasant memories. Among the secular disciples, Sagong Hyan was notorious. More importantly, he had been directly responsible for one of the most miserable events of Mook's previous life. With a friendly smile, Sagong Hyan suggested that they become friends. He mentioned hearing rumors that the Merchant King's son had entered the Wudang sect as a secular disciple and had assumed that Mook was the person in question. Mook immediately denied the claim, insisting that he came from nothing more than an ordinary farming family. Sagong responded with exaggerated sympathy. According to him, someone with such a humble background would struggle greatly in the harsh world ahead. Therefore, he generously decided that he had no choice but to become Mook's friend. With that, he extended his hand. The sight triggered a vivid memory. Before his regression, Mook had eagerly accepted that very hand. At the time, he possessed neither talent nor influential connections. He had sincerely believed that fate had handed him the opportunity of a lifetime. Instead, it had marked the beginning of one of the worst experiences of his youth. The memory resurfaced clearly. Instructor Hyan had stormed into the training grounds carrying a suspicious black bag. Without warning, the instructor dumped the contents of the black bag onto the floor. The entire training ground erupted into gossip and whispers. Furious, the instructor loudly announced that the materials had been discovered inside the secular disciples' quarters. Watching the scene unfold, Mook immediately recognized the collection. Those were the very spring paintings Sagong had been secretly reading. The memory was so clear that he almost laughed. Sagong had stubbornly refused to lend them to anyone, especially him, and at the time Mook had thought the miser deserved whatever trouble came his way. Unfortunately, things had not unfolded as he expected. Instead of accusing the real owner, the instructor pointed directly at Mook and declared that the materials had been discovered inside his room. Completely stunned, Mook had immediately denied the accusation, insisting that none of the paintings belonged to him. The instructor refused to listen. Furious, he condemned Mook for daring to bring such vulgar materials onto the sacred grounds of Mount Wudong. While Mook desperately tried to explain himself, Sagong stood quietly in the background, casually whistling as though he had nothing to do with the situation. Without investigating any further, the instructor expelled Mook from the sect on the spot. Remembering that humiliating experience now, Mook felt his irritation rise once again. Back then, he had been too poor and powerless to seek revenge. Surviving from one day to the next had consumed all of his attention. Now, however, things were different. When Sagong extended his hand in friendship in the present, Mook immediately slapped it aside with a sharp smack. Meeting the other disciple's eyes without the slightest hesitation, he bluntly rejected the offer. He mocked Sagong's arrogance, questioning whether learning a few martial arts techniques and being born to an influential family had convinced him he was some sort of king. He pointed out how ridiculous it was to watch someone act so superior despite accomplishing nothing of real value and suggested that the bald disciple grow up. The insult immediately wiped the smile from Sagong's face. He stepped forward, his boots scraping against the stone floor, and confronted Mook directly. The expression in his eyes suggested that he had expected resistance, but not outright hostility. What stood before him was not a cautious disciple but someone who seemed to have nothing to lose. Mook merely responded with a smug grin. He casually suggested that if Sagong was so eager for a fight, they might as well start brawling immediately, and get expelled together. For a brief moment, Sagong found himself at a complete loss. There was no reasoning with someone who genuinely did not care about the consequences. Unable to continue the argument, he retreated after delivering a weak warning that Mook should just wait. He left looking thoroughly irritated. Watching him go, Mook could not help feeling disappointed. Being expelled immediately would have solved many of his problems. In his previous life, the incident had occurred roughly a month later, but his ultimate goal remained the same. He needed to leave Wudang as soon as possible so he could take advantage of the knowledge he possessed from the future. If necessary, he would simply manipulate the upcoming secular disciple evaluation to ensure his departure. Before he could think further, John Oh-soo hurried over with obvious concern written across his face. He questioned what had gotten into Mook and pointed out the danger of provoking someone like Sagong. If the two of them ended up matched against one another during the evaluation, the outcome could be disastrous. Mook simply shrugged. The pairings were supposedly random, and he would deal with whatever happened when the time came. John found his attitude surprisingly optimistic. However, Mook knew the truth. This was not optimism. He remembered exactly how the evaluation had unfolded in his previous life. His opponent had been one of Sagong's followers, and the result had been a humiliating defeat. Lacking both talent and strength, he had stood no chance. Unless something unexpected changed the future, he expected the exact same outcome this time. And honestly, that suited him perfectly. All he needed to do was lose convincingly, appear completely hopeless, and allow himself to be escorted off the mountain. Just in case, however, he kept a certain secret weapon in reserve. Before long, the secular disciple evaluation began. Inside the arena, disciples exchanged sluggish and unimpressive blows while the supervising instructor Hyan watched with visible boredom. His expression suggested he would rather be anywhere else than judging the spectacle before him. Then a familiar voice spoke from behind him, casually observing that the event had already started. The instructor immediately straightened. The newcomer was none other than Chonghua. Surprised by the visit, the instructor asked what had brought such an esteemed figure to the evaluation. Hua calmly reminded him that he had been invited to observe the secular disciples. The instructor admitted that he had indeed extended the invitation but doubted there was anyone worth watching. Rather than responding directly, Hua asked whether the sparring pairings had truly been assigned at random. The instructor explained that they were technically random, though he occasionally made small adjustments behind the scenes. Looking across the arena, Hua spotted Mook sitting comfortably in the rear, casually playing a grass flute, while everyone else nervously prepared for their matches. A thoughtful smile slowly spread across his face. Crossing his arms, he watched the carefree disciple for a moment before a rather dangerous idea entered his mind. With obvious interest, he asked whether he could personally adjust the next matchup. Without suspecting anything, the instructor readily agreed and gave him complete freedom to do as he pleased. The moment he received permission, Hua's smile widened ever so slightly. While John sat beside him playing a surprisingly beautiful tune on a grass flute, Mook waited calmly for the next matchup to be announced. He was completely convinced that his path to freedom was only moments away. Before long, the instructor called out the next participants. The first name was Mook Wayang. Mook casually waved to John and assured him that he would be right back. With absolute confidence, he descended the steps toward the arena, already imagining the simple defeat that would lead to his expulsion from the sect. Then the instructor announced his opponent. It was Sagong Hyan. Mook froze in place. Slowly, he lifted his head toward the balcony. There, standing above the arena, was Chonghua. The person wore a bright smile that somehow felt far more dangerous than any expression of anger. At that moment, Mook became completely certain that the man had tampered with the bracket solely to see what would happen. Before he could complain, the instructor signaled for the match to begin. Across the arena, Sagong's face lit up with excitement. He looked like a child who had just received the perfect gift. Believing that his prey had delivered itself directly into his hands, he charged forward like a raging bull. Shouting that he had warned Mook to wait, he launched himself into the air and drove a massive fist straight toward Mook's head. Mook barely slipped backward in time. His carefully crafted plan of losing peacefully to an insignificant opponent had vanished completely. However, years of experience as a merchant had taught him one simple truth. When circumstances changed, strategies changed with them. Without hesitation, he squeezed the small black pouch hidden in his hand and threw a cloud of fine sand directly into Sagong's eyes. A horrified scream erupted from the bully. The spectators on the balcony fell completely silent. None of them had expected such a shameless tactic. Mook, meanwhile, wasted no time admiring his handiwork. Wearing a broad grin, he immediately rushed forward. Sagong swung wildly, blinded by pain, but Mook effortlessly ducked beneath the attack. Using the basic Samjay fist technique, he drove a solid punch into the bully's chin. The impact snapped Sagong's head upward. Before the larger disciple could recover, Mook followed with a second punch directly to the face, throwing off his balance entirely. However, the moment the strike connected, Mook noticed something strange. His body felt unusually light. Before he could understand why, a massive hand suddenly seized his wrist. Sagong grabbed him and violently slammed him into the stone floor. Pain shot through his body. Groaning, Mook realized he had become too excited and remained within striking range for too long. Blood trickled from Sagong's mouth as the larger disciple rose to his feet. His eyes burned with fury. Covered in dust and blood, he looked ready to tear someone apart. When he promised to end the fight right there, Mook suddenly realized he might have underestimated how dangerous the situation had become. From the balcony, the instructor was practically losing his mind. He shouted furiously about dirty tactics and unsportsmanlike conduct and looked ready to intervene personally. Before he could move, however, a hand stopped him. Hwa stood beside him, completely unconcerned. Rather than condemning Mook's actions, he calmly advised his junior brother to continue watching. The Hwa remarked that the Mook appeared to have a very specific plan. Back in the arena, Sagong Hyen raised his foot and brought it crashing down toward Mook's ribs. Mook rolled away at the last possible second. The stomp shattered the stone tiles beneath them. Dust exploded into the air. Quickly regaining his footing, Mook lowered himself into a defensive stance while his heart pounded violently inside his chest. Sagong attacked again. His fist cut through the air with tremendous speed. Yet something unexpected happened. Mook's eyes followed the attack perfectly. His feet shifted naturally across the stone floor. It felt as though his body already knew exactly what to do. He slipped beneath the punch and delivered another precise counterattack directly into Sagong's cheek. The strike landed cleanly. For a brief moment, Mook simply stared at his own hand. He could hardly believe what had happened. The movements felt effortless. Techniques that had once seemed awkward and difficult now flowed naturally through his body. Then realization struck him. Only one thing had changed. He had purchased agile movement from the mysterious bamboo slip. The system skill had transformed his physical abilities. Roaring in frustration, Sagong unleashed a barrage of reckless attacks. Heavy punches flew from every direction. Yet Mook found himself slipping between them with surprising ease. The cheap skill he had purchased for 3 copper coins had completely rewritten the limits of his body. He darted inside the bully's guard and drove a powerful straight punch directly into his nose. Blood sprayed through the air. Sagong stumbled backward before collapsing onto the stone ground in a dazed heap. A huge grin spread across Mook's face. The pay-to-win system was absurd. If money truly translated directly into power, then building a merchant empire had suddenly become the most important objective in the world. Unfortunately, the fight was not over. Slowly, Sagong pushed himself back to his feet. He wiped the saliva from his mouth and swore revenge. Immediately, the atmosphere changed. Mook felt the air grow colder. The bully's presence became noticeably heavier. White steam poured from his mouth as he began circulating internal energy. In an instant, his speed tripled. His fists cut through the air with enough force to create visible shockwaves. Forced onto the defensive, Mook retreated rapidly across the arena. His boots scraped against the stone as he struggled to maintain distance. Space was disappearing. The bully continued advancing relentlessly. Finally, Sagong raised a massive fist for what looked like a decisive finishing blow. A twisted smile spread across his face. He was certain that his prey had nowhere left to run. Mook immediately understood the problem. Without any internal energy of his own, even agile movement could not save him from a direct hit. Just as the punch descended, a wooden scabbard dropped from above. A sharp crack echoed across the arena. The attack stopped instantly. Standing between the two disciples was Wa. Having descended from the balcony, he appeared calm and elegant despite the tension surrounding him. His gaze settled upon Sagong. The warmth from his earlier smile had completely disappeared. With cold eyes, he questioned whether the disciple felt no shame using internal energy against a complete novice. Even the lowest street thug, he remarked, would not sink to such disgraceful behavior. Sagong immediately panicked and pointed accusingly at Mook, shouting that he had been the one to use dirty tricks first by throwing sand into his eyes. Wa glanced back at Mook and calmly admitted that the accusation was, unfortunately, a fair point. After a brief pause, he remarked that a disciple of the Wudang sect behaving like a common street ruffian was unacceptable. He informed Mook that he would be punished accordingly, and ordered him to remain where he was. Mook obediently accepted the judgment. With the matter settled, Wa declared the secular disciple evaluation concluded. While maintaining a respectful expression on the outside, Mook was celebrating internally. He had humiliated his greatest enemy, made himself appear completely unsuitable for the sect, and secured what he believed was a guaranteed ticket out of Wudong. As he looked up at the moon, his thoughts drifted toward the future. He was already planning which luxury goods he would begin selling once he left the mountain the following day. However, events elsewhere were unfolding very differently from what he expected. Inside the main pavilion, Wa sat quietly, deep in thought. The instructor Hyan noticed his unusual silence, and asked whether something was wrong. To the Hyan's surprise, Wa replied that he felt better than ever. The Hyan immediately launched into a passionate argument. In his opinion, Mook deserved immediate expulsion. Sagong had merely lost his temper during the match, but Mook had entered the arena with sand prepared in advance. That level of planning, he insisted, proved that the boy was rotten to the core. Wa listened without interruption. After a long silence, he closed his eyes and asked a simple question. Had the instructor actually paid attention to the way Mook moved during the fight? He pointed out that Mook had only begun learning the most basic techniques a few days earlier. Despite that, his dodges, counters, and footwork had been remarkably precise. Such performance should have been impossible for a beginner. To Wa, there was only one explanation. The boy was a hidden martial arts prodigy. The Hyan remained unconvinced. Regardless of talent, rules were rules, and punishment was still necessary. Wa nodded in agreement. A faint smile appeared on his face as he quietly wondered what kind of punishment would be most appropriate. The answer arrived the following morning. Standing before the gathered disciples, the instructor Hyan announced Mook Wai Young's sentence. Rather than expulsion, he would be assigned to serve in the finance pavilion. Hyan instructed him to be deeply grateful for Wa's merciful judgment. Still grumbling about the decision, the instructor walked away muttering that expulsion would have made far more sense. Left standing alone, Mook felt as though his soul had departed from his body. He was not being expelled. His carefully crafted plan had collapsed completely. Clutching his hair in frustration, he silently questioned why spring paintings had gotten him expelled in his previous life while throwing sand into someone's eyes apparently earned him a job. The entire disaster could be traced back to one impossibly handsome master who genuinely believed he was helping. A short while later, John approached from behind. He attempted to cheer Mook up by pointing out that avoiding expulsion was a good thing. Considering the talent he had displayed, perhaps he should aim even higher and try to become a main mountain disciple. Mook stared at him as though he had spoken in ancient language. Inwardly, he rejected the idea completely. He knew better than anyone that he possessed absolutely no martial talent. During his previous life, after achieving success as a merchant, he had tried to learn martial arts properly. Despite years of effort, he had been so hopelessly clumsy that he could not even master a single form. He had been a completely lost cause. Opening the mysterious bamboo slip, he stared at the floating text. The miracle that had occurred during the evaluation had not been the result of talent. It had happened solely because of the strange system he privately referred to as the paid-to-win martial shop. Without it, none of his achievements would have been possible. After releasing a long sigh, he decided to accept reality for the time being. There was no point dwelling on what could not be changed. After saying goodbye to John, he made his way toward the finance pavilion. If early expulsion was no longer an option, then he would need to find a different path. Soon, he arrived before the massive gates of the finance pavilion. The building served as the center of Wudong's finances, managing wealth, records, and transactions throughout the sect. If he was going to be trapped there, he might as well search for useful information that could benefit him in the future. With that thought in mind, he pushed open the sliding doors. The moment he stepped inside, he froze. A very familiar and annoyingly handsome face greeted him from within. Staring at Hua in disbelief, he asked whether the senior actually belonged to the financial department. Hua explained that he was technically affiliated with the archery pavilion. However, he had a close senior working in the finance pavilion. More importantly, he informed Mook that he would be serving as the pavilion's newest messenger. Confused, Mook asked what that position involved. Hua explained that the finance pavilion acted as the central hub of the sect. Documents were constantly exchanged between every hall and pavilion, and Mook's responsibility would be to deliver them. The explanation immediately caused concern. Some of the locations he would need to visit were more than 2 hours away on foot. He lacked proper movement techniques and could barely navigate the mountains safely. From his perspective, assigning him such a task was the fastest way to bring the entire sect's communication system to a halt. Hua simply laughed. He reassured the boy that he was only there to lighten the workload and that there was no need to worry. Since fate had brought them together, he intended to personally guide Mook through the terrain of Mount Wudong and teach him the various routes. Upon hearing those words, the color drained completely from Mook's face. He suddenly understood the scale of the nightmare awaiting him. That evening, panic consumed him. Alone in his room, he hurriedly packed his belongings. There were more than 10 major pavilions scattered throughout the mountain, and some of them were positioned in locations that practically required climbing cliffs to reach. Having already received a second chance at life, he had no intention of wasting it by accidentally falling off a mountain. Eventually, he reached a decision. Under the cover of darkness, he quietly slipped into the hallway. Keeping his footsteps silent, he moved past the sleeping quarters and crossed the main courtyard unnoticed. Once he reached the outer gates, he broke into a sprint. As far as he was concerned, a midnight escape was the only logical solution remaining. The moon hung high above the Wudong Mountains, and the night air remained still and quiet, creating the perfect setting for what Mook considered a flawless tactical retreat. Stepping out of the lodging, he was already overthinking every life choice he had ever made before even reaching the gate. A quick glance around revealed an immediate problem. The mountain paths were pitch black at night, with barely any visibility. Mook checked his private pay-to-win skill system and longingly stared at a night vision upgrade priced at 80 coins. Unfortunately, the mysterious shop maintained a strict cash-only policy. No credit. No vouchers. No exceptions. With not a single coin to his name, he was forced to rely on the most advanced stealth tool available to him, a massive blazing torch. He knew carrying a torch made him look like a walking target, but falling off a cliff in the darkness was not the kind of legacy he wanted to leave behind. Trying to reassure himself, he convinced himself that Wudong Mountain was far too large for anyone to notice one person sneaking around at night. 3 steps later, he walked directly into a night patrol. A sword was immediately drawn. Without hesitation, Mook activated what he considered his ultimate technique, shameless lying. He calmly explained that he was merely an innocent herb gatherer who had taken a peaceful nap and accidentally slept until nightfall. The guards stared at him as though he were the worst liar in the entire sect. Seeing the skepticism, Mook quickly showed his evidence. Earlier, he had grabbed a handful of random weeds growing beside the mountain path. The guards examined the leaves, then exchanged uncertain glances. None of them knew enough about medicinal herbs to identify whether the plants were genuine or not. Mook secretly grinned. Just in case, he had plucked a handful of random weeds, and they had unexpectedly become useful. There was no way those guards would know what actual medicinal herbs looked like. The patrol quietly discussed the matter among themselves. Even if he was lying, they had no real way to prove it. If he truly was an herb gatherer, stopping him would only create unnecessary trouble. Eventually, one of the guards handed the torch back to him and told him to proceed carefully down the mountain. Mook politely thanked them. The moment he was allowed through, he hurried down the stairs while celebrating internally. He had done it. Now that he had passed the sentries, escaping the mountain would be easy. Ahead of him lay a point he considered the final checkpoint. Once he crossed it, nobody would be able to stop him. Just as he was about to pass it, a familiar voice emerged from the darkness. It asked where he was going in such a hurry. Mook immediately recognized the voice. It belonged to the one person who had repeatedly ruined all of his plans. Hwa stepped into the torchlight wearing a calm smile and remarked that Mook could not possibly have believed he would fail to notice someone attempting to leave the sect. Mook slowly turned around. Of course it was him. Naturally, Hwa had appeared at the worst possible moment. Trying to remain calm, Mook asked how he had known he would attempt to escape that very night. Hwa chuckled softly before explaining that martial artists observed far more than ordinary people realized. The 5 desires and 7 emotions were all reflected upon a person's face, and even unconscious muscle movements revealed hidden intentions. Mook then asked what Hwa intended to do with him. For once, Hwa's expression became somewhat serious. He explained that before deciding anything, he wanted to hear Mook's reasoning. Countless people throughout the Jianghu dreamed of entering the Wudang sect, yet Mook seemed determined to leave. Mook explained that becoming an official secular disciple required defeating a 3rd-generation main mountain disciple. If he failed that examination, everything would be meaningless. More importantly, he knew himself better than anyone. He simply lacked the talent to reach such heights. Hwa questioned whether he had even truly tried. Mook insisted that he was a hopeless case. Hwa stared at him for a long moment, completely unconvinced. He pointed out that he could see through the lies and encouraged Mook to speak honestly. He promised that whatever was said that night would remain between them. Hwa then stated that Mook's talent appeared remarkable, making his desire to leave even more confusing. Mook inwardly groaned. There was no way he could reveal that his so-called talent came entirely from a mysterious martial arts shop powered by money. After a brief pause, he decided to gamble on arrogance instead. He declared that the Wudang sect simply was not large enough to contain him. Silence followed. Almost immediately, regret hit him. Even he thought that statement sounded ridiculous. For a moment, Hwa's shoulders trembled. Concerned, Mook asked whether he was all right. The next instant, Hwa burst into laughter. Still laughing, he explained that he finally understood exactly what Mook meant. Mook's eyes lit up. To his surprise, that absurdly arrogant speech had actually worked. Hopeful, he asked whether that meant Hwa would allow him to leave. His optimism lasted only until Hwa calmly answered no. He explained that as a member of the Wudang sect, he could not simply ignore such a statement. Slowly, he drew his sword. Moonlight reflected across the polished blade. High-in he announced that he would show Mook the true essence of Wudang. Immediately, a powerful wind pressure surged outward, nearly tearing the torch from Mook's hand. The atmosphere transformed. The air itself felt heavy. Hwa leaped gracefully into the air, his blue robes flowing like water. A massive circle of glowing energy began forming beneath him across the stone ground. He instructed Mook to watch carefully. Taking a single step, he caused the ground itself to seem as though it rippled. Then he began to move. His sword painted flawless blue trails through the darkness. Mook stood frozen. The movements were gentle and serene, flowing like a calm river. Yet moments later they transformed into something fierce and overwhelming, carrying the unstoppable momentum of a storm. Softness and hardness intertwined perfectly. Neither interrupted the other. Neither dominated the other. The cycle continued endlessly, embodying the very pinnacle of Wudang's martial philosophy. It was the ultimate wisdom sword. A gigantic yin-yang symbol composed entirely of pure energy illuminated the entire area. Mook could only stare. The scale of the technique completely exceeded his imagination. Eventually, Hwa sheathed his sword and turned back with a smug smile. He asked whether Mook finally understood the depth of the sect. Mook remained expressionless. After several seconds of silence, he admitted that there was still one thing he did not understand. Hwa raised an eyebrow and asked what it was. Mook looked directly at him and voiced the question that had been tormenting him all night. He wanted to know exactly what Hwa wanted from him. Master Hwa sheathed his sword with a satisfying click. Since Mook had doubted the Wudang sect's capabilities, he decided it was time to show him just how deep the sect's roots truly ran. Stepping closer, Master Hwa raised a hand that glowed with a soft purple light. He placed it beside Mook's burnout torch and calmly channeled his aura into it. Instantly, the torch flared back to life. He lifted his hand proudly and declared that there was no genius or monster in existence that the Wudang sect could not nurture. Mook responded by facepalming, letting out a long, exhausted groan. He wondered why every martial artist always seemed to think about cultivation. They were trying to convince a man destined to become the greatest tycoon in the Central Plains to become a monk. To him, it felt like trying to force a giant boulder into a tiny gourd, It simply was not going to happen. Realizing there was no point trying to reason with the old master anymore, he decided it was time for Plan B. Mook cleared his throat and politely apologized for his earlier arrogance. A moment later, however, he loudly declared that he absolutely refused to stay on the mountain. Master Wa's expression immediately turned cold as he asked why. Mook planted his hands on his hips and shouted that he simply did not want to stay, and there was nothing the master could do to change his mind. Master Wa stroked his chin with a sigh. He remarked that Mook truly had no idea how much talent he possessed. Mook stared at him in confusion, wondering what he meant. Master Wa quietly muttered that it was like watching a child crawl toward a well. He could not simply stand by and watch someone with such extraordinary potential throw himself into a life of mediocrity. Mook asked what he was talking about. Master Wa calmly explained that it meant Mook would not be leaving Wudang without his permission. Besides, Mook had only entered the sect because of his father's generous donation. His parents would likely have no objections. In fact, they would probably be delighted once they learned that he would personally oversee Mook's training. Mook completely lost his composure. He demanded to know why the master was so determined to keep him there. He was nothing more than the son of a poor farmer, so why was the great Wudang sect, which lacked for nothing, so desperate to keep him? He glared at Master Wa, desperately waiting for a logical explanation. Instead, the old master simply smiled, pointed a finger at him, and answered with a single sentence. The reason was simple. Just because. The day after his grand escape ended in complete failure, Mook officially became a provisional core disciple of Wudang. Completely bewildered, he asked what provisional meant. Master Wa explained that it would be difficult to keep a close eye on him as an outer disciple. Although he had wanted to accept Mook as a full core disciple from the beginning, the sect leader had refused to grant permission because he did not yet trust him. Mook admitted to himself that such a reaction was only natural. Master Wa continued by saying that Mook could become an official core disciple whenever he proved himself through his efforts. All he had to do was trust his talent and continue moving forward. Mook buried his face in his hands and released the most miserable sigh of his life. He realized that if he truly wanted to make use of his mysterious talent, he first needed to escape the mountain. For a moment, he considered revealing the existence of the martial shop and explaining that he could only grow stronger by earning money. Surely that would be better than wasting away in Wudang. If only he had enough cash, he could purchase another talent and make another escape attempt. Looking back at Master Wa, Mook cautiously asked whether he happened to have any money on him. The master's face immediately fell as he stared at Mook with complete disbelief. He remarked that it was the first time anyone had ever asked him if he carried cash. Mook awkwardly scratched his cheek and explained that he only wanted to exchange the voucher the master had given him for actual money. Master Wa replied that silver and copper coins would be useless on Wudang Mountain. Mook answered honestly that he simply liked money. With another weary sigh, Master Wa accepted the voucher and agreed to exchange it. The two of them then walked into the grain storage hall. Mook looked around in confusion and asked why they had come there. He jokingly wondered whether the master had mistaken his request for food instead of money. Master Wa reminded him that he still had to complete his punishment by working there. After exchanging the voucher, the master received a heavy string of copper coins. Instead of handing it over, however, he calmly announced that he would hold on to the money until Mook completed his assigned service. Mook's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. He protested that the money belonged to him. Master Wa calmly warned him to lower his voice before others assumed he was trying to steal it. He insisted that he was simply safeguarding the money. Mook argued that currency always held greater value in the present than in the future. Master Wa raised an eyebrow and jokingly asked whether Mook was now demanding interest as well. Mook quickly replied that he did not need any interest. He only wanted his money back. Ignoring the complaint, Master Wa tucked the string of copper coins deep into his sleeve. He admitted that he would gladly return it under normal circumstances, but he was convinced Mook would immediately attempt another escape the moment he got his hands on it. Therefore, the money would remain with him until Mook finished his duties. Just then, a tired voice from the back of the room asked what all the commotion was about. Another master entered while rubbing his head, complaining that the noise had interrupted his nap. Master Wa smiled warmly upon seeing him. He greeted the newcomer, senior brother Chong Su, and remarked that he looked as though he had only just woken up. He politely addressed him as the hall master. Chong Su merely shrugged. Titles meant little in a place like this, he said. He practically considered himself exiled anyway. Looking Mook over, he remarked that this was the provisional core disciple everyone had been talking about. Judging by appearances alone, the boy did not seem to possess a single martial bone in his body. Master Hua chuckled and assured him that Mook possessed remarkable talent. Entrusting Mook to Chong-su's care, Master Hua turned around and left, leaving the two alone. Mook immediately asked what he was supposed to do now. Privately, he suspected that the two masters had planned everything together. Nevertheless, he realized he had little choice but to cooperate for the time being. Chong-su motioned for him to follow. He explained that Mook did not appear particularly clever, so he would keep the instructions simple. Every day, from the hour of the rabbit until the hour of the rooster, Mook would carry bamboo tubes to the Samcheong pavilion. Mook's eyes widened in horror. He pointed out that the Samcheong pavilion stood at the very summit of the mountain. Since he had not even learned Lightfoot techniques yet, he would likely fall to his death trying to reach it. On top of that, there were far too many bamboo tubes to carry. Without hesitation, Mook threw himself onto the ground, kicking and flailing while loudly insisting that he could not possibly do such a task. He was certain he would slip and die before reaching the top. Chong-su simply looked down at him without changing his expression. He replied that, in that case, he would have no choice but to expel Mook for negligence. Since Mook was already a provisional core disciple, he reminded him that expulsion would require the destruction of his dantian. Mook instantly froze. One trembling hand slowly clutched his abdomen. He knew that the dantian was not only important to martial artists. If those vital pressure points were destroyed, he would spend the rest of his life as a cripple. Chong-su casually waved his hand. He wished Mook good luck and instructed him to report back once he finished his work. Mook slowly pushed himself off the ground, trembling with frustration. He silently cursed Master Hua, realizing the old man had made him a core disciple solely so they could subject him to treatment like this. With a stream of muttered curses, Mook hoisted the enormous sack onto his back. Upon reaching the base of the mountain, he grasped the first stone handhold. Having no other option, he began the grueling climb straight up the sheer cliff face, silently swearing that one day he would make every one of them pay for this. Morning sunlight spread across the Wudang Mountains, painting the peaks in warm golden light, and creating the perfect peaceful beginning to a new day. Far below the summit, however, one exhausted hand desperately clung to the edge of a sheer cliff. After a tremendous effort, Mook finally dragged himself onto the flat stone at the top. His breathing came in ragged gasps, as though his lungs were about to collapse. He dropped onto his back and stared blankly at the sky. He genuinely felt as though he were dying. After resting for a while, Mook slowly sat up and watched the sun rise over the mountain peaks. Despite everything, he had to admit that the breathtaking view almost made the brutal climb worthwhile. Just then, someone approached from behind. "Are you the runner?" Mook nodded. "Yeah. I have the scrolls." The man immediately grabbed the bag from him. "What took you so long? There's still a mountain of work left, so get moving. Master Chong-su said nobody clocks out until every delivery is finished. Don't forget it." Mook simply lay there wearing the fakest smile imaginable. Internally, he silently vowed revenge against every Wudang master responsible for his suffering. The following morning, Chong-su stepped out of the pavilion gates and found Master Hua waiting outside with his usual cheerful smile. Master Hua asked how Mook had handled his first day of work. Chong-su shot him an irritated glare. "You're the one who suggested the Samcheong Pavilion cliff. Why are you asking me?" Master Hua chuckled. "Was there something wrong with the location?" Chong-su snorted. "You really do have a wicked streak. The Samcheong Pavilion cliff embodies the deepest principles of Wudang's Blue Cloud Steps. Anyone incapable of understanding its profound flow finds even a single climb soul-crushing. That is the nature of that cliff." Master Hua laughed awkwardly. "I may have suggested the cliff, but you're the one who made him climb it in the middle of the night, senior brother. No matter how gifted the boy is, scaling that peak under nothing but moonlight should have been impossible." Chong-su raised an eyebrow. "Were you trying to crush a genius's spirit? It doesn't matter anymore." Master Hua tilted his head in confusion. "I'll handle the remaining deliveries. How many are left? See for yourself." Master Hua walked to the doorway and peered inside. The instant he looked into the room, his eyes widened. "Senior brother Chong-su, something isn't right." Chong-su simply closed his eyes with a sigh before walking over. "There's nothing wrong." Both masters looked down at Mook. Curled beneath a thick blanket, he was fast asleep, quietly drooling without a care in the world. Chong Su explained that the boy had completed every single delivery during the night. The workload had never been intended for one trip. Mook must have climbed the cliff at least 3 separate times. Chong Su admitted that he had never seen anyone comprehend the principles of the blue cloud steps on their very first attempt. The saying that there was always a heaven beyond heaven perfectly described Mook's talent. Had the boy entered Wudong 10 years earlier, he would have become one of the sect's greatest pillars. Master Hua looked down at the sleeping teenager with obvious satisfaction before suggesting that they should train him even harder. The following morning, Mook slowly opened his eyes. He looked like a zombie crawling out of a swamp. A massive yawn escaped him. He reflected that the previous day had been a genuine brush with death. Without the assistance of his agile movement skill, he would have become a flattened corpse at the bottom of the gorge. Once again, he silently praised the existence of the pay-to-win shop. At that moment, Chong Su walked over. "Are you seriously tired after such a simple task? Get your lazy self off the floor." Mook politely folded the blanket before offering it back. "Master, did you cover me with this for blanket? Here, I'm returning it." Chong Su immediately frowned in disgust. "You're trying to return a blanket covered in drool? Throw it away or sell it." Mook happily decided to keep the expensive blanket instead. He privately wondered whether thanking someone was really that difficult. As he packed his belongings, Chong Su silently watched him. When Mook finished, Chong Su instructed him to collect the next batch of scrolls from the adjoining room and follow him. They had somewhere specific to go. The pair quietly walked along the mountain path, their footsteps echoing across the stone trail. Mook followed behind, wondering what kind of scheme the masters had prepared for him this time. As they continued, he realized they were heading toward the path leading back to Samcheong Pavilion. He wondered whether he was simply being sent to deliver scrolls again. Without warning, Chong Su tossed a strip of blue cloth over his shoulder. It landed directly across Mook's face. Picking it up, Mook looked at it in confusion. "Why are you giving me a headband?" Chong Su calmly answered. "Cover your eyes. You're climbing the cliff again. Blindfolded." Mook immediately threw the cloth onto the ground. "Climbing at night was one thing, but you seriously expect me to do it blind? There's a huge difference between darkness and complete blindness. I'm not doing something this ridiculous." Chong Su calmly asked a single question. "Would you rather have your energy center destroyed?" Without another word, Mook quietly picked up the blindfold and tied it over his eyes. Standing before the towering cliff in complete darkness, he wondered how his life had ended up like this. As he placed one hand against the cold stone, he silently suspected that the Wudong masters were simply searching for a legally acceptable way to kill him. Carefully, he began climbing. His feet searched cautiously for tiny footholds while his system-enhanced reactions kept him from slipping. Even so, a single mistake would send him plummeting to his death. As he reached upward, a faint blue light suddenly surrounded his hand. He froze. Although his eyes remained completely covered, something impossible happened. His vision suddenly became perfectly clear. A massive network of glowing blue energy nodes spread across the cliff face, revealing the ideal climbing route. Mook was completely stunned. Despite wearing a blindfold, he had never seen the mountain more clearly. Brilliant blue lines connected every glowing point along the cliff. He immediately realized that the pay-to-win system had essentially handed him a complete cheat sheet for climbing the mountain. He resumed climbing. Every handhold landed perfectly. Every foothold appeared exactly where it needed to be. Sweat streamed down his face, yet each movement became increasingly smooth and natural. It felt as though the mountain itself was guiding him, effortlessly drawing his body into the perfect rhythm. Every step aligned seamlessly with the mountain's flow of energy. A single flawless route carried him upward, revealing the true essence hidden within Wudong's movement technique. At last, he reached the summit. Removing the blindfold, Mook inhaled a deep breath of crisp mountain air. A warm sensation gradually spread throughout his body. Instinctively, he placed a hand over his dantian. He immediately realized that this cultivation method was on an entirely different level from the martial arts he had learned in his previous life. Back then, his internal chi had barely stirred. Now, it burned with unmistakable vitality. Before he could fully appreciate the sensation, something heavy struck him squarely on the head. Thunk! Master Su stood behind him while holding a thick martial arts manual. "Who gave you permission to remove the blindfold?" Rubbing the sore spot on his head, Mook complained that the master did not need to throw things so dangerously. Looking down, he noticed the title printed across the cover. Blue Cloud Steps. Master Su explained that Mook had officially reached the first stage of the technique. However, because he had first learned it through physical experience alone, his mastery remained incomplete. Once he studied the manual and truly understood its profound principles, his comprehension would undergo another transformation. Mook quietly stared at the manual. The feeling was completely unfamiliar. In his previous life, he had wandered from one second-rate sect to another, struggling to learn even mediocre martial arts because of his natural lack of talent. Now, however, he had been given the opportunity to study one of the supreme martial arts of the 9 great sects. A slow grin spread across his face. Moments later, he began chuckling to himself while clutching the manual like a villain who had just acquired the ultimate treasure. Chong Su silently watched the strange teenager. A giant sweat drop slowly formed on the side of his head as he wondered what exactly was going through Mook's mind. Master Su explained that what Mook had learned so far was only a tiny fraction of Wudong's true teachings. If he officially became a main mountain disciple, he would gain access to martial arts far more profound than the Blue Cloud Steps. With a teasing grin, Master Su leaned closer and mockingly asked whether Mook still intended to run away from Wudong. Mook immediately attempted to negotiate. He admitted that staying at Wudong was not entirely unpleasant, but wondered whether becoming a main mountain disciple would still allow him to work in the secular world. Master Su replied that it depended on the pavilion to which he was assigned. If Mook joined the Gakchen Pavilion, he could indeed carry out work in the secular world. Mook's eyes immediately lit up. He eagerly asked whether that meant he could establish a merchant group or even an escort agency. Master Su glanced at him before answering that such ventures would not normally be permitted. However, with the sect leader's approval, Mook could potentially serve as a protector for an organization in the secular world. Although slightly disappointed by the answer, Mook handed the delivery bag to a grateful monk before turning to leave. He remarked that he would keep the suggestion in mind for the future, and assumed he was finished for the day now that the deliveries were complete. Master Su immediately stopped him. He asked where Mook thought he was going, reminding him that he still had work left to do. Mook blinked in confusion. He pointed out that his assigned duty was delivering messages for the Samcheong Hall. Master Su calmly informed him that the terms of his service had changed as of the previous day. Starting immediately, Mook would be responsible for delivering every message belonging to the Gakchen Pavilion. Mook's expression twisted with pure rage. He could not help thinking that martial artists were unbelievably unreasonable. In his eyes, they all seemed like stubborn fools living in their own isolated world. The joy he had felt after learning one of Wudong's supreme martial arts had been completely crushed in an instant. Pointing furiously at Master Su, Mook protested that changing the terms of someone's work without even informing them beforehand was outrageous. Even bandits, he argued, would never behave that shamelessly before calling the masters a bunch of crazy horse-headed fools. Master Su's eyes immediately turned cold. An instant later, thud! His fist drove straight into Mook's stomach. The impact blasted every bit of air from Mook's lungs, making it feel as though his soul had nearly left his body. He collapsed onto the dirt, gasping painfully. Master Su looked down at him without the slightest hint of sympathy. He remarked that Mook apparently had no desire to live out his natural lifespan. Disobeying the words of a superior within Wudong was not the same as behaving freely in the secular world. If Mook wished to test the consequences, he was welcome to experience death firsthand. Mook's miserable screams echoed throughout the mountains as he desperately begged for mercy. 2 months passed. A massive downpour drenched the entire Wudong mountain. Mook sprinted through the heavy rain with both hands shielding his head before finally rushing into his room, soaked from head to toe. After changing out of his drenched black uniform and into dry clothes, he muttered to himself about the sudden storm. It had already been 2 months since he learned the Blue Cloud Steps. He realized that constantly traversing the steep terrain of Wudong had gradually strengthened his body. Now, even after delivering every message assigned to the Gakchen Pavilion, he still had spare time remaining each day. His thoughts drifted back to the day Master Su had announced that all message deliveries for the Gakchen Pavilion would become his responsibility. Looking back on it now, Mook admitted that he had originally believed such a workload was completely impossible. Somehow, however, he had adapted and managed to accomplish it every day. Even so, he still felt Master Su could have explained everything properly instead of springing it on him without warning. As his own abilities steadily improved, unexpected changes also began occurring within the martial talent shop. A notification informed him that the shop's rank had increased. With the upgrade came a dramatically expanded selection of talents available for purchase. The only downside was that the list had become so enormous it was difficult to browse through everything. A slow grin spread across Mook's face. He wondered whether stronger talents continued unlocking as he himself became stronger. The entire system almost felt like something he was raising and developing alongside himself. To his surprise, he found the process genuinely enjoyable. Smack! Before he could finish the thought, an enormous fist crashed onto the top of his head, driving him face first into the floor. A large bump instantly swelled on his head. Clutching it in pain, Mook shouted in shock, demanding to know what had just happened. He asked when Master Su had entered the room and why he was hitting him again. Master Su asked Mook whether he had used the blue cloud steps while making his way to the Gakjin pavilion. Pointing toward the floor, he revealed two faint, glowing blue footprints. He explained that Mook had been applying excessive force at several points during his movement. With more dedication, he should eventually be able to traverse the path without leaving even a single footprint behind. Mook could not help thinking that Master Su might as well have told him to walk through the air itself. Even so, he had to admit that Master Su had been teaching him surprisingly well. On top of that, Mook had later discovered that every beating he had received from the Master had actually served to stimulate his acupoints and accelerate his training. Had he not realized that, he probably would have attempted another escape, even if it meant having his dantian destroyed. Just then, Master Wa arrived. He remarked that Mook had now reached the bare minimum required for his training. It was time for him to begin practicing at the Gungdo Pavilion. Mook's eyes immediately brightened. He eagerly asked whether that meant his service at the Gakjin Pavilion had finally come to an end. Master Wa instantly crushed that hope. He explained that such a thing was highly unlikely. Whenever Mook was not training, he would continue performing his service duties. Once the weather cleared, they would travel together to the Gungdo Pavilion, where Master Wa would introduce him to his other disciples. If Mook eventually became an official main mountain disciple, those disciples would become his senior martial brothers. Mook silently nodded. Soon afterward, the two approached the massive training hall. Walking behind Master Wa, Mook's expression gradually became more serious. He wondered if he was finally going to receive proper martial arts instruction. To be honest, he had become increasingly dissatisfied with his current situation. Master Wa had personally brought him to Wudang as a provisional main mountain disciple, yet all he had done was deliver messages for the Gakjin Pavilion. Learning the blue cloud steps had certainly been worthwhile, but it was not something Master Wa had personally taught him. Every time Mook had questioned why he had been brought there only to spend his days running errands, Master Wa had always given the same answer. There is a time for everything. At the time, Mook had considered those words completely ridiculous. Perhaps, however, that time had finally arrived. He found himself wondering what kind of people his future senior martial brothers would be. At the very least, he hoped they would be as approachable as John O. Su. Stepping into the training grounds, Mook looked ahead. The moment he did, his entire face froze in horror. Standing beside him, Master Wa smiled proudly. A group of tiny disciples, each appearing to be around 8 years old, came running straight toward Mook. "It's the grass flute guy! My grass flute broke! Fix it! Mine too! Hurry up!" Every child eagerly stretched out a broken grass flute toward him. Mook blinked repeatedly. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. These little brats were supposed to become his senior martial brothers? His voice trembled as he asked whether he was truly expected to call these children senior brother. Master Wa smiled. "Of course." Mook immediately exploded. He protested that he had already reached the age of Yakuan, 20 years old, and could not possibly call children more than 10 years younger than himself senior brother. Master Wa merely shrugged. He explained that such situations were quite common within the Mirim. Mook gritted his teeth. Pointing out that he was still only a provisional disciple, he argued that it would hardly be appropriate for him to behave like a formal main mountain disciple already. Master Wa nodded. He assured Mook that there was no need to address them as senior brothers just yet. There would be plenty of time for that in the future, and he could adjust gradually. Before Mook could reply, Master Wa suddenly leaped into the air. He instructed everyone to introduce themselves before announcing that he had other work to attend to and promptly departed. Mook quickly reached out. Wait! It was already too late. Master Wa had completely disappeared. Mook remained standing with one hand frozen in the air. He realized he had been completely abandoned. A young boy quietly approached from behind. So, you're the one who's going to become my junior brother? The child was Myung-sung. He possessed the face of an innocent angel, and the attitude of an experienced corporate middle manager. Tilting his head, Song waited expectantly for an answer with complete authority. Mook let out a quiet sigh. It seems so. Song immediately frowned. It seems so? Mook glanced around and noticed the other children of the Myung generation standing nearby without saying a single word. Judging by the way none of them dared interrupt, Mook concluded that Song was probably the eldest senior brother among them. Song folded his arms. He warned Mook not to use such a casual tone in front of a Taoist before questioning why he looked so dissatisfied. Displaying such an expression towards someone of higher rank, he implied, was unacceptable. Mook sighed inwardly. He finally understood how such rigid martial artists were raised. They had been taught exactly like this from childhood. In his eyes, Song was a disgustingly perfect little Murim disciple. Stepping closer, Song continued speaking. He remarked that Mook seemed determined to disrupt the order of Wudong. Because Mook had been making grass flutes for the younger disciples, they could no longer concentrate on their training. Instead of devoting every moment to practicing martial arts, they were wasting time with toys. At this rate, he wondered what would become of Wudong. Even while delivering the lecture, however, Song repeatedly stole nervous glances toward one of the broken grass flutes nearby. Mook narrowed his eyes. He asked whether Song was referring to the grass flutes as mere toys. Without another word, Mook casually produced a brand new grass flute. The instant Song saw it, his eyes sparkled. Mook immediately understood everything. It became obvious that Song had wanted a flute himself all along but had been too embarrassed to admit it. Judging from the situation, he had probably bullied the younger children into handing over theirs instead. Deciding to lighten the mood, Mook raised the flute to his lips. A beautiful melody echoed throughout the training grounds. The soothing music drifted across the surrounding arenas, causing even another disciple of the Myung generation to stop training and approach to listen. When the performance ended, Song and the younger disciples enthusiastically applauded. Mook smiled politely. He remarked that, from his humble perspective, it was important for the eldest senior brother to lead by example. If Song only played the grass flute during breaks, the younger disciples would naturally follow his example and return to training afterward. Mook then extended his hand. Resting on his palm was the brand new grass flute. He offered it to Song as a gift, and politely asked him to keep the younger disciples under control. Myung-sung hesitantly reached out and accepted the grass flute with his tiny hand. He awkwardly remarked that, if anyone witnessed the exchange, they would assume he had bullied his junior brother into giving it to him. However, since rejecting such sincere generosity would be rude, he would accept it for the time being. The other disciples of the Myung generation quietly whispered among themselves. One of them wondered if that had really been the reason Song had been so irritable lately. Another simply nodded in agreement. At that moment, a voice called out from behind them. The newcomer remarked that he had heard vulgar melodies echoing through the training grounds and had come to investigate. What he found, he said, was quite a remarkable sight. The speaker was Myung-han, accompanied by two other disciples of the Myung generation. Song turned toward him. "What are you doing here?" Mook narrowed his eyes. The names Myung-jaeong, Myung-sung, and Myung-han all sounded confusingly similar. Even after all this time, he still found the naming conventions difficult to keep track of. Han strode towards Song. He told him to have some shame, asking whether he was not embarrassed to behave like this in front of his junior brother. Mook quietly studied the newcomer. More importantly, he found it hard to believe Han was supposedly the same age as himself. The man's rugged appearance made him seem far older. Han suddenly turned toward Mook. He asked whether Mook was the merchant brat who had been selling grass flutes around Wudong. Selling merchandise inside the sect, Han declared, was enough to earn someone their wrists cut off. Veins bulged across Han's forehead as his anger visibly grew. Before Mook could answer, Myung-jaeong stepped protectively in front of him. He assured Han that he would properly discipline his own junior brother. Han leaned closer. He questioned whether Jaeong truly considered the merchant brat his junior brother. Jaeong nervously admitted that Mook was still only a provisional disciple. A smug smile spread across Han's face before he looked directly at Mook. He remarked that Mook must be the secular disciple his master had mentioned. Trying to become a main mountain disciple at Mook's age, Han claimed, was utterly ridiculous. The two disciples standing behind Han burst into laughter. Han pointed directly at Mook. He mockingly asked whether Mook simply lacked common sense for someone his age. Before he could continue, tap. Song calmly pressed the tip of his wooden practice sword against Han's pointing finger. His expression remained perfectly composed. He quietly declared that Mook was his direct junior brother. Han glared down at him. He asked whether Song was deliberately trying to provoke him. Song calmly replied by asking whether Han was afraid. Han smirked. Look who's talking. Standing quietly behind them, Mook blinked in confusion. He honestly wondered what he was even doing in the middle of this situation. Jiang quietly leaned closer and explained that Han and the others were disciples of martial uncle Sasek Chongyu. Sasek Chongyu and Master Chonghua had never gotten along, meaning Mook would likely continue encountering conflicts like this as one of Chonghua's disciples. Mook forced an awkward smile. He could not help thinking that Jiang was already treating him like family. Han raised his wooden sword and pointed it toward Mook. He ordered Song to step aside, declaring that he intended to discipline the secular brat for disrupting Wudong's order. Song refused to move. He calmly answered that Mook was the man destined to become his junior brother. If anyone was going to discipline him, it would be Song himself. One of Han's companions tossed him a wooden training sword. Han caught it effortlessly before stepping forward. He argued that he was also Mook's senior brother, making it perfectly natural for him to administer a little discipline. Song slowly drew his own wooden sword. His eyes became icy. If Han truly wished to know who he was, Song declared, he would gladly explain with his sword. Han grinned as his grip tightened around his weapon. The two immediately charged at one another. Crack! Their wooden swords collided with tremendous force, splinters scattering across the training ground. Watching from the sidelines, Jiang enthusiastically cheered. He proudly announced that Song's lifetime record against Han stood at 108 victories to 93 defeats across 201 matches. Statistically speaking, Song should win again. Mook silently observed the duel. To him, the intensity of their fight resembled sworn enemies battling for their lives. After learning martial arts himself, however, he realized he could now perceive the flow of combat in ways he never could before. Because both fighters relied heavily on the blue cloud steps, their movements appeared surprisingly familiar. As a result, Mook found himself effortlessly predicting every step they would take. Even the outcome of the duel gradually became obvious to him. Then, Song ducked beneath one of Han's wide swings. Whoosh! His wooden sword swept across with explosive force. Bam! Han was launched backward across the stone floor. He crashed heavily onto the ground while his wooden sword spun away with a loud clatter. Standing over him, Song breathed heavily. Though exhausted, he firmly ordered Han to gather his friends and leave. One of Han's companions immediately rushed forward. He protested that Song's words were unnecessarily harsh. Another disciple stepped out with a smug grin. He proposed a second match against a fresh opponent. Song swung his sword once before forcing himself to steady his breathing. His legs were already trembling from exhaustion. His stamina had nearly run out. Even so, his pride refused to let him retreat. Raising his wooden sword once more, Song calmly accepted the challenge. The second duel immediately began. Wooden swords clashed repeatedly throughout the arena. With every exchange, however, Song's movements slowed noticeably. His exhausted body could no longer keep up. Finally, smack! His wooden sword was knocked high into the air before embedding itself into the stone floor. His opponent stepped forward and pressed a wooden blade against Song's throat. He proudly declared his victory. Without hesitation, Jiang stepped forward. Drawing his own wooden sword, he challenged the victor, asking whether defeating an exhausted opponent was really enough to satisfy him. The bully simply grinned. He told Jiang to stop talking and show him what he could do. Their wooden swords collided immediately. Clack! Standing quietly nearby, Mook carefully analyzed the situation. To him, the battle resembled a classic team match. Jiang might be capable of holding his own against someone like Han. The real problem, however, was everyone else. On Master Wa's side, only Song and Jiang possessed meaningful combat ability. The remaining disciples were little more than children. Although their side possessed the advantage in stamina, Mook understood that, at such a young age, even a single year's difference in growth created an overwhelming gap in ability. Unless someone exceptionally powerful appeared to overturn the situation completely, the outcome was already decided. One after another, the younger disciples under Master Wa's faction were defeated. Each of them tumbled across the stone floor. Mook silently watched his teammates fall one by one. He realized they were on the verge of being completely wiped out. Slowly, Han climbed back to his feet. An ugly grin spread across his face as he looked directly at Mook. Now that all of Mook's protectors had been defeated, Han declared that he could finally discipline the secular newcomer personally. Mook looked at Han with a completely expressionless face, though his thoughts were racing. His gaze shifted toward the younger disciples sitting on the ground. They clutched their bruised arms as they cried in pain. They had willingly risked being beaten just to protect him. Despite himself, Mook admitted that he felt a little guilty about simply letting the matter slide. He slowly rose to his feet. Looking Han directly in the eye, he calmly asked whether Han would rather have a lesson with him instead. Han stared at him as though Mook had spoken an entirely different language. A slow smirk spread across his face. He told Mook that, if he knelt and begged immediately, he would pretend everything that had happened was nothing more than a joke. Mook met his gaze without the slightest hint of hesitation. He flatly replied that the offer was complete garbage. Han's smile vanished instantly. His fists clenched so tightly that veins bulged across the backs of his hands. He declared that Mook had chosen to refuse the toast and would instead drink the penalty. Mook tilted his head in confusion. He wondered how Han could even be drinking alcohol at his age. Then again, he remarked that no waiter would ever look at Han's face and mistake him for an actual child. Mook burst into laughter. Han completely lost his temper. With a furious roar, he launched a lightning-fast punch straight toward Mook's face. Whoosh! Mook effortlessly slipped past the attack. His movements flowed like water as his feet glided smoothly across the stone floor. A confident grin spread across his face. Han attacked again. And again. And again. Every punch missed by only a few millimeters. While effortlessly dodging each strike, Mook calmly analyzed the situation. He had not challenged Han recklessly. After watching every duel that had taken place, he had realized something important. Although Han's martial arts were more advanced than his own, Mook's ability to read martial arts was superior. Perhaps it was because he had spent far more years observing countless battles throughout his previous life. More importantly, every one of Han's techniques relied on the blue cloud steps. To Mook, every movement looked painfully obvious. He could predict each attack long before it was thrown. Meanwhile, Han's breathing gradually became heavier. No matter what technique he used, he could not land a single hit. His expression slowly changed from anger to complete confusion. Finally, Mook spotted an opening. Stepping forward, he drove a counterpunch toward Han's ribs. Thud. The punch landed. Yet instead of injuring Han, Mook's fist simply bounced off the hardened muscles reinforced by years of internal energy training. A sharp wave of pain shot through his arm. He immediately grabbed his bruised hand. At that moment, Mook realized he had made a serious miscalculation. His footwork and perception might already have reached an impressive level, but his physical body remained painfully weak. He simply lacked the strength necessary to injure an inner disciple who had spent years cultivating internal energy. Compared to these disciples, who had strengthened their bodies through constant training since childhood, he was still little more than an ordinary civilian. He realized he could continue dodging indefinitely. However, if Han managed to land even a single clean punch, his fragile body would be finished. Han pulled back another powerful punch. Watching the movement, Mook narrowed his eyes. He immediately decided he needed to change tactics. There was only one option left. He would have to gamble. Instead of retreating, Mook suddenly charged directly toward Han. To everyone watching, it appeared as though he intended to exchange punches head-on. Without hesitation, Han poured all of his strength into a devastating straight punch aimed squarely at Mook's face. The fist barely grazed Mook's cheek. A thin line of blood appeared where the attack had scraped his skin. Han blinked in surprise. Mook had not even attempted to block. Using the momentum created by the near miss, Mook twisted his body through the air. He dramatically spun backward, launching himself away as though he had been struck by an overwhelming blow. The performance was so convincing that it looked as though Han's punch had sent him flying. Han froze completely. His face turned deathly pale as he stared at Mook in absolute shock. Han wondered if he had actually hit the kid, completely unaware that Mook had just pulled off the most legendary insurance scam in Murim history. Mook had deliberately dived face first onto the stone pavement, kicking up a dramatic cloud of dust, and now lay there completely motionless. Suddenly, the tense atmosphere came to an abrupt halt as a booming voice echoed across the training arena. The adults had arrived. Master Su shouted angrily from behind Han, demanding to know what he thought he was doing. Hearing the voice, Han nervously turned around and saw Master Su and Master Hua approaching with expressions that made it clear they were in no mood for excuses. When Han remained silent, Master Su raised his voice again, furiously demanding an explanation. Han grew increasingly worried but could not bring himself to answer. At that moment, Master Yu arrived, placing a hand on Han's head. He remarked that he had rushed over to investigate the commotion, only to find such a scene before him. Meanwhile, Master Hua played his role in the drama flawlessly. He cradled Mook like a tragic hero from a cheap stage play. At the same time, blood began flowing from Mook's nose as he acted as though he were on the verge of death. Master Yu observed that it looked like nothing more than a small scuffle between children. Master Hua immediately struck one of Mook's pressure points, instantly stopping the nosebleed. He angrily argued that it could hardly be called a mere scuffle when a martial artist had attacked someone who had never learned a single martial technique. The nosebleed stopped immediately. The atmosphere changed in an instant. Master Hua's playful smile vanished, replaced by a terrifying glare that could have frightened even demons. He demanded that Han apologize to Mook immediately. Watching everything unfold, Mook realized the relationship between Chong Yu and Chong Hua was even worse than he had originally believed. Since he had figured out the clear cloud steps by himself, Chong Hua technically was not wrong in saying that he had never formally learned martial arts. Even so, Mook wondered if Master Hua was truly that desperate to pressure Chong Yu. Master Yu, looking somewhat flustered, ordered Han to apologize. Han obediently stepped forward and apologized to Mook. Satisfied, Master Yu instructed his disciples to return. However, Mook had no intention of letting the matter end there. As a born merchant, he immediately called after Master Yu and politely asked him to wait. Master Yu and Han both turned back toward him. Mook calmly pointed out that no one had bothered asking how the actual victim felt. Master Yu glared at him and replied that he had already received an apology, asking what more he could possibly want. Mook simply chuckled and casually requested compensation for his medical expenses. Master Hua and Master Su struggled to suppress their laughter. Confused, Master Yu asked whether Mook was seriously asking for money. Mook confidently requested exactly 2 silver taels, no more and no less, before innocently asking whether that amount sounded excessive. Privately, Mook knew it was an outrageous amount. 1 silver tael was worth 1,000 copper coins, making it an enormous sum to extort through such a scam. Even so, he decided Master Yu could either pay or appear stingy. Mook then remarked that surely a respected member of Wudong's Chong generation would not argue over medical expenses. Otherwise, he wondered what others might think if word spread. Master Yu realized he had been completely cornered. Trembling with barely restrained anger, he reached into his robes and dropped 2 shining silver taels into Mook's waiting hands. Seeing the silver, Mook happily confirmed that payment had been received. Master Yu then demanded to know his name. Mook proudly introduced himself as Mook Huaiyang. Without another word, Master Yu turned sharply and walked away with his injured disciples, silently swearing that he would never forget that name. As soon as they disappeared, Mook happily tucked away his hard-earned silver taels while Master Hua cleared his throat beside him. Master Hua casually remarked that he would take care of the silver for him. Mook instantly clutched his money pouch like a wild beast protecting its prey and angrily refused, insisting that he had earned it with his own hands. Instead of arguing, Master Hua complimented Mook's acting, saying he had never seen anyone launch themselves into the air and face plant into the dirt so convincingly. Mook froze, realizing his deception had been exposed. Curious, he asked how Master Hua had figured it out. Master Hua revealed that he had been watching ever since Myong Song and Myong Han started fighting. Mook complained that if Master Hua had seen everything, he should have intervened sooner because he could have been seriously hurt. He also realized that Master Hua had intentionally revealed his presence only when Mook's turn came. Master Hua ignored the complaint and instead asked whether Mook felt ashamed for failing to land even a single blow against someone much younger than himself. Mook casually cleaned his ear with 1 finger, completely unconcerned. He explained that he had never learned martial arts, so it was only natural that he could not compete with someone who had spent half a lifetime training. Master Hua clenched his fist, declaring that although he was not Mook's official master, he was still his elder and therefore had a responsibility to teach him proper manners. Mook stared back with a completely blank expression, replying that if the lesson involved martial arts etiquette, he had absolutely no interest. Before he could finish speaking, Master Wa's fist suddenly came flying toward him. The ground exploded where Mook had been standing. The impact blasted apart the stone pavement, leaving behind a massive crater. Smiling calmly, Master Wa explained that Murim had its own rules and etiquette. One of those rules was that simply claiming not to be a martial artist did not mean someone was not one. Meanwhile, Master Su escorted the other disciples out of the arena. Master Wa announced that from that moment onward, he would personally teach Mook proper manners. He warned him not to tense up because making mistakes would only make the beatings hurt even more. Mook slowly lifted his face from the crater where it had been embedded, revealing a huge steaming lump on his head. Master Wa calmly raised his fist again. Mook desperately cried out for a timeout, but his pleas were ignored. The tutorial stage had officially ended, and the real training was about to begin. From that day onward, training under Master Wa became part of Mook's daily routine. The schedule itself was simple. After completing physical conditioning under Chong Wa's supervision, Mook would be beaten relentlessly. The masters referred to it as acupuncture stimulation, but its intensity was on an entirely different level from Master Su's training. Under Master Su, the pain disappeared within an hour. Under Master Wa, however, the agony lasted well over half a day. After another brutal session, Mook lay on the ground with smoke practically rising from his exhausted body. He finally admitted to himself that he had endured the training for several days, but had reached his absolute limit. He decided it was finally time to use the martial talent shop. Although he had originally planned to save enough money for a high-grade talent, he simply could not survive Master Wa's fists any longer. Summoning the glowing bamboo slip that served as the system interface, Mook reviewed the available talents. Thanks to the relentless training, he had unlocked numerous new options. Combined with the 2 silver taels he had swindled from Chong Yu, he finally had enough money to purchase something useful. As expected, expensive talents such as Heavenly Bone and Heavenly Eye remained unavailable due to their astronomical prices. Even the basic swordsmanship and physical talents cost 10 silver taels. Then one inexpensive talent caught his attention. Without hesitation, Mook selected the talent called Tough Physique, which cost exactly 2 silver taels. The silver coins dissolved into sparkling golden system particles. The system displayed a simple message confirming that the purchase had been completed. Immediately afterward, a massive surge of blue mystical energy enveloped Mook's body. Feeling the changes take effect, Mook wore his signature smug grin, eager to show his senior exactly what he had gained. Some time later, Master Wa stood in the training hall, wearing a peaceful smile that made him look like a saint who had never harmed a fly. He asked Mook whether all his hard work was finally paying off and whether he could feel the rewards of his training. At the time, Mook was lifting enormous metal dumbbells without a shirt, revealing an incredibly well-defined 8-pack physique. Despite his impressive appearance, he looked back with lifeless, exhausted eyes and admitted that he did not feel rewarded at all. Every single day had become nothing but pure, relentless agony. Master Wa sighed in disappointment, saying that he had hoped Mook would find joy in seeing himself grow stronger. Since that did not seem to be the case, he suggested they begin their usual routine. Lowering into a fighting stance, Master Wa tightly clenched his fist and reminded Mook not to tense his body because doing so would only make the blows hurt even more. Without warning, Master Wa lunged forward and drove an energy-infused punch straight into Mook's chest. The impact was so overwhelming that the massive dumbbells flew from Mook's hands and crashed across the stone floor. However, instead of coughing blood or collapsing, Mook's eyes widened as a wild grin slowly spread across his face. He immediately realized that he could actually withstand the attack because of the tough physique talent he had purchased from the system shop. At that moment, he decided the 2 silver taels had been worth every coin. Mook burst into laughter, realizing that if a cheap 8th-grade talent could increase his durability so dramatically, it was far more effective than he had ever expected. Master Wa stared at his own bronzed fist in slight confusion. Meanwhile, Mook reached an exciting conclusion. Instead of saving for expensive high-grade talents, perhaps he could simply stack numerous low-grade ones. If each provided such incredible value, he might someday become the strongest person in the world using nothing but 8th and 9th class talents. Master Wa slowly approached him, narrowing his eyes as he remarked that it was strange how Mook had suddenly become so sturdy. Whatever the reason, it made no difference. A terrifying smile spread across Master Wa's face as he rolled up his sleeves. Since Mook's body could now endure greater punishment, he announced that he could finally start hitting him a little harder. Mook's smug expression disappeared instantly as an enormous blue fist rushed toward his face. Watching it approach, Mook suddenly remembered an important lesson. He might not know much about expensive things, but there was always a reason cheap things were cheap. The punch landed. The entire training field erupted into a towering explosion of dust and energy. When the dust finally settled, Manhwa peeked over the arena wall with wide, worried eyes. Concerned for his junior brother, he asked whether Mook was still alive. Mook lay completely flat on the ground and weakly admitted that he was definitely not okay. Trying to be helpful, Manhwa suggested that if the pain became unbearable, Mook should try screaming because Master Wa occasionally went easier on people who did. Mook slowly sat up while rubbing his aching neck and muttered that Master Wa never showed him that kind of mercy. Manhwa kindly offered to speak with Master Wa and asked him to be less harsh. Panicking, Mook frantically waved both hands and begged him not to do any such thing, insisting it would only make his daily beatings even worse. After wishing Mook a safe trip back to Gakjin Hall, Manhwa waved goodbye. Mook walked away with a long, exhausted sigh, every part of his body aching from the training session. Looking back at the cheerful child, Mook realized that Manhwa genuinely wanted to look after his direct junior. Unfortunately, Mook also knew that such kindness only made his own situation even more awkward. As he gazed up at Wudong's enormous buildings, he silently vowed to find a way to escape the sect as soon as possible. Eventually, he entered Gakjin Pavilion, where Master Su was busy sorting through paperwork. Seeing Mook arrive, Master Su immediately told him there was no work for the day and ordered him to leave. Mook eagerly asked whether he was certain, insisting that he was willing to do absolutely anything for Gakjin Hall. Master Su looked at him suspiciously and wondered since when Mook had become so devoted to the hall. Rather than wasting time there, he ordered Mook to return to Gungdo Hall for more training. The moment Mook heard those words, all hope left his body. Returning to training meant facing Master Wa's terrifying fists once again. In desperation, Mook threw himself onto the floor, wrapped both arms around Master Su's legs, and begged him to assign literally any task, insisting that he would physically die if he had to continue training under Master Wa. Master Su tried to shake him off while angrily calling him pathetic and repeatedly ordering him to get out. Before the struggle could continue, the heavy wooden doors slowly creaked open. A disciple stepped inside and politely excused himself. Master Su turned toward the newcomer and asked what the matter was. The disciple reported that a large market was about to open in Ichang, and that merchants from Shanxi Prefecture had requested an escort. Master Su immediately asked about the scale of the event. The disciple explained that approximately 50 major merchant guilds would be participating in the market. Mook's ears immediately perked up as he heard the scale of the event. Realizing that 50 merchant guilds would be participating, he concluded that it was an enormous market. Shanxi merchants were famously wealthy, so it made perfect sense that they would hire Wudong for protection despite the sect's expensive escort fees. Master Su decided that 10 men should be enough for the escort mission and asked how much the merchants were offering. The disciple replied that the payment would be 10 silver taels per person. Hearing that, Master Su muttered that the Shanxi merchants truly were rich and remarked that it was good business for Wudong. Mook, however, nearly exploded internally. From a merchant's perspective, he considered the Shanxi merchants to be outrageously stingy. In his eyes, they were hiring Wudong martial artists for an absurdly low price and shamelessly taking advantage of the sect. Ignoring Mook's reaction, Master Su asked about the current market price of salt, mentioning that Wudong should purchase from the Shanxi merchants again that year. The disciple explained that the current price was 30 sacks of salt for 10 silver taels. However, the merchants had also offered a discount if Wudong purchased more than 500 sacks. Master Su smiled, calling it excellent news. Unable to contain himself any longer, Mook suddenly stood up and shouted that everyone had completely lost their minds. Master Su immediately grabbed Mook by the collar, lifting him off the ground as he demanded to know whether the boy was looking for a fight. Realizing he had overreacted, Mook quickly apologized for the outburst. Even so, he insisted that they were no longer living decades in the past and that the proposed price was completely unreasonable. Master Su glared at him and pointed out that Mook had not even been born during those earlier times, asking what he could possibly know about the matter. Those words caused Mook to freeze. He suddenly remembered that he had regressed. Still, something felt terribly wrong. The salt prices he remembered from his previous life were only half as high. According to his memories, 10 silvertails should have purchased 60 sacks of salt instead of 30. After thinking it through, he finally realized what was happening. The salt management system had not yet changed. Originally, merchants needed an official salt license to sell salt legally. Those licenses were issued only at the northern frontier because supplying the borderlands was extremely difficult. The government had created the system to encourage merchants to travel there, allowing the frontier to become the center of salt distribution throughout the country. That policy was known as the gaijeng system. Eventually, however, it would be abolished and replaced by the geoseek system. Under the new system, all salt would be gathered at inland government agencies and sold directly under the central government's supervision. Mook had never learned the exact reason behind the abolition of the gaijeng system. He suspected that salt merchants had probably evaded enormous amounts of tax revenue, giving the government an excuse to strip them of their privileges. Regardless of the reason, the outcome had been clear. Salt became far easier to obtain, causing prices to collapse to less than half of their previous value. Remembering all of this, Mook immediately realized the danger. The geoseek system was scheduled to be introduced around this exact period, shortly after he had turned 20 in his previous life. Salt prices would soon crash. The Shangxi merchants were clearly trying to unload their remaining inventory before the announcement became public, meaning they almost certainly possessed insider information. Since Wudong relied heavily on buying and reselling salt to fund its operating expenses, purchasing such a massive quantity now would result in catastrophic financial losses. Determined not to let that happen, Mook stepped forward, placed a hand on Master Su's shoulder, and firmly declared that Wudong absolutely must not purchase the salt yet. He could not simply stand by and watch the sect fall victim to such an obvious trap. Master Su looked thoroughly annoyed and questioned what Mook could possibly know about commerce. He pointed out that discounts from Shangxi merchants were extraordinarily rare. Mook calmly answered with a question of his own. If merchants who never offered discounts suddenly lowered their prices, wasn't it obvious there had to be a reason? Master Su dismissed the argument as simple paranoia. Mook disagreed. He explained that no merchant was ever without ulterior motives. Every merchant pursued profit above all else. Whenever merchants voluntarily lowered their prices, there was always a hidden reason behind it. Privately, Mook felt slightly guilty for speaking so harshly about fellow merchants, but he believed it was the only way to convince Master Su. Master Su then asked whether Mook was prepared to take responsibility for such bold claims. Without any hesitation, Mook smiled and confidently accepted full responsibility. Deep down, he knew he could back up every word. Afterward, Master Su turned to the disciple and quietly began discussing the matter. Meanwhile, Mook allowed his imagination to wander. Once the geoseek system took effect and his prediction proved correct, everyone would surely begin looking at him differently. He even imagined people calling him the Shining Wai Yang. Since Wai Yang meant bright light, the nickname seemed strangely fitting. The thought amused him enough to make him chuckle. His daydream ended abruptly when Master Su called his name in a serious voice. Master Su informed him that if he was truly so confident in his claims, then he would have the opportunity to prove them personally in front of the sect leader. Mook's face instantly froze. His eyes widened in disbelief as he stammered, asking who exactly he was supposed to stand before. Moments later, the scene shifted to Wudong's magnificent grand hall. Mook Waiyang stood before an enormous, intricately carved wooden table, looking remarkably small within the vast chamber. Seated at the head of the table was a living legend, Chong Yui, the Taiji Sword Emperor, one of the world's 5 great swordsmen and the supreme leader of the Wudong sect. The overwhelming aura radiating from the elderly master was enough to suffocate an ordinary person. Now, Mook was expected to convince him that a massive economic collapse in the salt market was imminent using nothing but his words. Watching the scene unfold, Master Su privately believed that Mook simply lacked proper respect and fear toward the sect's grandmasters. Mook might speak recklessly around him, but Master Su wondered whether the boy would still dare to behave so boldly while standing face to face with the sect leader himself. The sect leader looked toward Mook and remarked that he was the boy Chonghua had spoken about. His ancient, discerning eyes carefully studied the young disciple from head to toe. Although he did not immediately notice anything particularly extraordinary about Mook, he trusted Chonghua's judgment. After all, Chonghua had never been known to misjudge talent. The sect leader then instructed the hall master of Gokshun Pavilion to speak first and explain why Wudong should not purchase salt at the Ichang market. Master Su awkwardly admitted that the opinion had not originally been his own. The sect leader immediately questioned him. He pointed out that any opinion brought forth from Gakchen Pavilion ultimately became the hall master's responsibility. He demanded an explanation for the hesitation and asked whether Master Su had truly submitted such a proposal without any supporting evidence. If that were the case, he warned that Master Su alone would bear full responsibility. Those words caused Master Su's entire body to tremble. Nervously, he tried to explain that the situation was not what it appeared to be, but his voice faltered before he could finish. Deep inside, he realized everything had already gone completely off script. Seeing Master Su unable to continue, Mook calmly stepped forward, raised one hand, and politely informed the sect leader that he did not actually belong to Gakchen Pavilion. The sect leader calmly replied that regardless of Mook's feelings, he was standing there precisely because he was associated with it. Mook answered that, at the very least, joining Gakchen Pavilion had never been his own choice. The sect leader narrowed his eyes. Meanwhile, Master Su looked as though his soul was about to leave his body. He could hardly believe the boy possessed so little instinct for self-preservation. The sect leader finally addressed Mook directly. He acknowledged that opportunities to purchase discounted salt from Shaanxi were extremely rare. Other buyers would undoubtedly rush to secure advance purchases, making time critically important. He then asked Mook why he insisted on preventing the trade. Mook respectfully corrected him first. He confidently stated that there was no need to rush because they still had plenty of time. Crossing his arms with complete confidence, he declared that the major merchant groups, including the Huizhou merchants, would not even touch this particular salt deal. The sect leader immediately asked for proof. Mook replied that the son of a merchant king was currently among the secular disciples. If the sect leader wished to verify the claim, he could simply question him directly. Mook identified the disciple as a member of the Yeo family, one of the 15 prominent clans of Huizhou. The sect leader acknowledged the name, and immediately ordered Chong Su to bring the disciple before him. Master Su did not hesitate for even a moment. He hurried out of the hall as fast as he possibly could. Several tense moments of silence passed. Eventually, the sliding doors opened once again. Yeo Hongyang entered the hall looking visibly nervous before bowing deeply and respectfully informing the sect leader that he had answered the summons. The sect leader greeted Hongyang and explained that he wished to ask about the upcoming Yichang market. He had heard that the Huizhou merchants would not be participating that year and wanted to know whether the information was true. Completely caught off guard, Hongyang hesitated briefly before confirming that the report was indeed correct. The sect leader then asked why the Huizhou merchants had chosen to stay away from such a large market, especially one that would host around 50 rows of merchant stalls. Hongyang respectfully replied that he would have to confirm the details with his family. However, as far as he knew, none of the 15 clans of Huizhou planned to participate in the Yichang market. Hearing that, the sect leader slowly closed his eyes, silently allowing the implications of the information to settle in. After dismissing Hongyang, the young merchant quickly bowed and slid the doors shut behind him, leaving Mook standing confidently in the hall with a noticeably smug expression. Watching everything unfold, Mook suddenly realized how Master Hua must have felt on the night he had tried to flee the sect. At the time, Master Hua had stopped him as though he were saving a child from falling into a well. Only now did Mook truly understand that feeling. Considering everything that had happened in his previous life, he had originally intended to ignore Wudong's financial affairs altogether. Yet he found himself unable to stand by and watch the sect unknowingly march toward a devastating loss. To him, it looked no different from watching a helpless child walk straight toward a well. The sect leader finally opened his eyes and asked how Mook had known all of this. Mook calmly answered that he was a merchant at heart. He explained that the information was a merchant's trade secret and politely asked the sect leader not to press him further. Although he could not provide concrete proof at the moment, he was absolutely certain the salt trade would fail. Therefore, he advised Wudong to wait and purchase salt later instead. The sect leader remained silent for a long time. Eventually, he pushed back his chair, rose to his feet, and announced that Wudong would cancel the advance purchase. He then instructed Master Su to go to the market and buy the salt instead. Master Su immediately acknowledged the order. Mook, however, looked completely flustered. He quickly pointed out that the sect leader had misunderstood him. His argument had never been about canceling the advance purchase alone. He was insisting that Wudong should not purchase the salt at all for the time being. Master Su immediately lost his temper and began scolding Mook. Before he could continue, however, the sect leader calmly stepped forward and rested a hand on Master Su's shoulder, silently stopping him. He then turned his attention back to Mook and clarified that his order had been directed at him all along. Mook stared back in complete confusion. Meeting his gaze, the sect leader's eyes took on a calculating look as an overwhelming spiritual pressure once again filled the grand hall. He ordered Mook to accompany Master Su to the market and personally purchase the salt. Since Mook had displayed such confidence in his own judgment, the sect leader added another condition. Mook would have to buy the salt for less than the current market price. If he failed, the sect leader declared that he would personally administer Mook's punishment. Mook immediately protested. He argued that the challenge was completely unfair. He could not understand why Wudong refused to wait just a little longer before buying the salt. Without the advantage of an advance purchase, he questioned how anyone could possibly negotiate a lower price from the notoriously shrewd Shangxi merchants. The sect leader patiently explained that Wudong's involvement in the salt trade served a far greater purpose than simply funding the sect's operations. Their true responsibility was to ensure a stable supply of salt throughout Hubei province and safeguard the well-being of its people. Because of that responsibility, purchasing salt was unavoidable regardless of market conditions. However, Mook's unsupported claims had already convinced Wudong to abandon the opportunity to secure the salt at a discounted advance price. Since Mook had been responsible for that decision, the sect leader reasoned that it was only fair for him to recover the difference through his own negotiating ability. Finally, the sect leader questioned whether Mook truly possessed the skills of a merchant, or whether he had merely exaggerated his own abilities. If the latter were true, he admitted that it would be deeply disappointing. Mook barely managed to contain his anger. A vein bulged on his forehead as he pounded his chest in frustration, arguing that he had already given valuable advice, yet now he was being expected to handle the negotiations as well. He proudly declared that he was a top-tier talent and certainly did not work for free. The sect leader slowly stroked his beard as a faint, knowing smile appeared on his face. Agreeing that such work deserved proper compensation, he offered Mook 1% of whatever amount he managed to save by purchasing the salt below the current market price. The moment he heard the offer, Mook's merchant instincts immediately took over. His mind began rapidly calculating the potential profits. Without hesitation, he demanded 10% instead. The sect leader calmly countered by increasing the reward to 3%. Mook immediately shouted back with a demand for 8%. Standing nearby, Master Su could only cover his face with one hand, completely stunned that a mere secular disciple was actually bargaining with the legendary sect leader of Wudong. The elderly master smiled calmly before making his final offer. 5%. Mook instantly reached out his hand and eagerly accepted the deal without another second of hesitation. To ensure there would be no misunderstandings later, he confirmed that the current market price stood at 10 silver taels for 30 dan of salt. If he managed to negotiate an even lower price, then 5% of the savings would belong to him. The sect leader calmly corrected him. Strictly speaking, the current forward purchase price was actually 9 silver taels for 30 dan. That clarification only made Mook grin even wider. Clenching his fist confidently, he declared that the amount involved was insignificant compared to the enormous profit he intended to earn. Without waiting for another word, Mook rushed out of the meeting hall while loudly reminding the sect leader to keep his promise. The sliding doors slammed shut behind him with a loud crash. After Mook had left, Master Su turned toward the sect leader and questioned whether it was truly wise to entrust Wudong's entire annual salt purchase to such an unpredictable child. The sect leader calmly replied that Mook's words had not lacked credibility. Furthermore, if Mook truly managed to purchase the salt more cheaply, the sect would only benefit from the arrangement. Master Su then asked how the sect leader had known Mook would never refuse such an offer. The sect leader sighed faintly before explaining that any man who proudly called himself a merchant would never turn down an opportunity to make money. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the secular disciples' training grounds. John O-Su sat peacefully playing a grass flute when Mook suddenly came sprinting toward him while loudly calling his name. John looked up in surprise and asked why Mook was there instead of training at the main mountain. Completely out of breath, Mook bent over with his hands on his knees before asking whether any merchants from Shangxi were currently staying at Wudong. John looked puzzled. He pointed out that if someone from Shangxi wanted to become a secular disciple, they would naturally choose the much closer Manhwa or Zhongnan sect rather than traveling all the way to Wudong. Mook sighed and admitted that he had expected that answer but felt compelled to ask anyway. Curious, John asked what the matter was. Mook explained that the Shangxi merchants would soon arrive at the Yichang market to sell salt. John failed to see the problem. remarking that Shaanxi merchants regularly traveled south to Jiangnan to conduct the salt trade. Mook's expression immediately became serious. Clenching his fist, he revealed that the entire business deal was nothing more than a carefully planned scam. The nearby disciples instantly lost their relaxed expressions. Outraged, they demanded to know whether those Shaanxi merchants truly intended to exploit Wudong's region by manipulating the price of something as essential as salt. Several hot-blooded secular disciples immediately jumped onto the railings, cracked their knuckles, and declared that they should simply beat up those thieving merchants before they had the chance. Watching their fiery reactions, Mook merely smiled with his eyes closed. Privately, he found the situation rather amusing. After all, merchants routinely deceived one another in pursuit of profit. That was precisely why names such as the Shaanxi merchants and the Huizhou merchants carried such influence throughout the business world. Among merchants, overcharging competitors was completely normal. In their world, the fool was not the person doing the cheating but the one foolish enough to be cheated. That was simply the unwritten rule of commerce. However, Mook also understood that everything changed when outsiders tried to exploit merchants from one's own region. Despite their reputation for caring only about profit, merchants still possessed a surprisingly strong sense of regional loyalty. If outsiders attempted to take advantage of their homeland, local merchants would often become the first to unite against them. Of course, Mook also recognized that such patriotism was not always entirely selfless. Damaging the local economy would eventually harm their own businesses as well. Still, he saw no reason to point out that particular detail. John turned back to him and asked how exactly the Shaanxi merchants were planning to rip everyone off. He pointed out that people were not stupid and would not simply stand by and let them manipulate the prices. Mook stepped closer, preparing to explain. Before he could, Yeo Hongyang arrived and asked if his name was Mook Yang. Both Mook and John turned toward the voice and saw Hongyang standing nearby with a nervous expression. Hongyang asked Mook if they could have a quick word. The two of them walked away from the other secular disciples. Once they were alone, Hongyang asked how Mook had known. Mook asked what he meant before realizing what he was referring to. He asked if it was about the system being abolished. The moment he said that, Hongyang stared at him with an incredibly sharp, serious expression. Seeing the look in his eyes, Mook realized that Hongyang's timid personality had been nothing more than an act. He concluded that the merchant king's son had been hiding his true status because standing out too much only attracted unwanted attention. In Mook's opinion, it was a smart strategy. Hongyang muttered that he had his suspicions, but he never expected Mook to know even that. He explained that even the officials in Beijing barely knew about it yet, so Mook must have an incredibly powerful backer. He then asked if Mook would be willing to introduce them. Mook knew he had no such person backing him, but he also knew he had no obligation to tell the truth. Raising a finger and putting on his best poker face, he declared that a merchant's greatest weapon was neither a sword nor a silver tongue, but secrets. He then asked whether that answered Hongyang's question. Hongyang paused for a moment before bursting into laughter. His serious expression completely disappeared as he wiped away a tear and remarked that he could not believe he was hearing the exact same words his father had drilled into him for years. Mook replied that the merchant king was, after all, an extraordinary man, so he had naturally picked up a thing or two. Inwardly, however, he admitted that he had learned those lessons long before his regression. He then extended his hand and asked whether, as a fellow Huizhou merchant, Hongyang would help him. Hongyang immediately refused and told him to count him out. Mook asked why. Hongyang explained that the elders had already reached an agreement. The Huizhou merchants had decided to turn a blind eye to whatever profits the Shaanxi merchants made from the salt trade. Mook let out a sigh and rested a hand on his hip, concluding that there was nothing he could do. Hongyang remarked that he was giving up surprisingly easily. Mook replied that the reason was obvious. The Huizhou merchants must have received something valuable in return. His eyes narrowed with a knowing look as he suggested that perhaps the Shaanxi merchants had agreed to overlook the Huizhou merchants' illegal smuggling operations. Hongyang's face instantly turned pale. Grabbing his forehead in disbelief, he groaned and wondered how a boy like Mook could possibly know so many classified secrets. He stepped closer until his face was only inches away and offered Mook 10,000 silver taels if he would introduce him to his mysterious backer. At the mention of 10,000 silver taels, Mook nearly began drooling. For a brief moment, he seriously considered revealing the truth about his regression just to claim the money. However, he quickly regained his composure and calmly repeated that a merchant's greatest weapon was his secrets. Hongyang laughed, and remarked that not even 10,000 silver taels could sway him, adding that Mook was far more strong-willed than he appeared. Mook could only break into an awkward sweat before quickly changing the subject and asking if the Huizhou merchants truly intended to remain on the sidelines. Han Yang confirmed that they did. He explained that whenever someone profited, someone else inevitably suffered a loss. He then asked what Mook himself hoped to gain by standing in the way of the Shangxi merchants. Mook explained that he had offered advice to the Wudong sect leader, only for the sect leader to order him to purchase the salt himself. On top of that, he had been threatened with personal punishment if he failed to buy it below the current market price. With a helpless sigh, he admitted that he was practically desperate. Hong Yang burst out laughing once again, finding the entire situation absolutely hilarious. He remarked that this must have been what Mook had been trying to accomplish in the meeting room. However, he pointed out that revealing the abolition of the Gaijeng system to the sect leader was a completely different matter. He then asked if Mook had somehow rubbed the sect leader the wrong way while trying to avoid explaining himself. Mook quietly reflected that, thanks to that misunderstanding, he would end up pocketing part of the profit margin himself. Hong Yang then asked what Mook's plan was, promising on his honor to keep it a secret if Mook told him. Mook agreed and leaned in, raising a hand as he prepared to whisper his grand scheme directly into Hong Yang's ear. Before he could speak, a voice suddenly interrupted them, telling them to wait. Mook looked over and saw that the newcomer was Sagong Hyan. He inwardly wondered why Sagong had chosen that exact moment to appear. Sagong demanded to know what they were plotting, warning that he would only ask politely once. Mook firmly replied that it was none of his business. Sagong explained that Sungro Gate was also handling escort duties for the festival, making the matter very much their business. He ordered Mook to start talking and warned that if he refused, he would spread rumors throughout the council that Mook was plotting something suspicious. Crossing his massive arms with a smug grin, Sagong added that he had no idea what Mook was planning, but he was certain it would bring him serious trouble. Mook gritted his teeth in frustration. Although he considered the threat childish, he knew Sagong was not entirely wrong. Even baseless rumors would be enough to drag him into the spotlight, no matter what he did. He wondered how he should deal with the situation. While Mook was still thinking, Han Yang casually stepped forward. Han Yang calmly stated that the matter actually did concern someone else because it involved the Merchant King. He declared that Sungro Gate had no business interfering. The moment those words were spoken, Sagong became visibly nervous and began sweating profusely. Han Yang continued by asking whether Sungro Gate truly believed it could look down on Yeo Hong Yang and the Yeo clan. He then questioned whether Sagong was prepared to take responsibility for such disrespect. Hearing that, Sagong gritted his teeth. He became convinced that Hong Yang was hiding something significant. He reasoned that if there were truly nothing to hide, there would be no reason for Hong Yang to invoke the Yeo clan's authority so aggressively. Deciding it was not worth pushing the issue any further, Sagong turned around and walked away. At that moment, John and another secular disciple arrived. John looked around in confusion and asked what had happened. Hong Yang immediately chuckled and explained that Sagong had been trying to eavesdrop on their conversation. He said he had barely managed to drive Sagong away and remarked that dealing with Sagong and his followers had not been easy. However, he believed he had applied enough pressure that they would leave them alone for a while. Watching the sudden change in Hong Yang's demeanor, Mook couldn't help thinking that his expression had changed completely in an instant. John then turned to Mook and asked what his plan actually was. The four of them leaned together, forming a tight circle in the middle of the arena as Mook quietly explained his strategy. After hearing the entire plan, Hong Yang nodded in approval and remarked that it was definitely worth trying. John and his fellow disciple exchanged excited looks and agreed that it sounded like a lot of fun. Mook flashed a dark, menacing grin and declared that it was going to be extremely fun. Some time later, the scene shifted to the bustling market. Master Su followed behind Mook while covering his ears from the overwhelming noise. Master Su complained that the place was far too noisy and asked where the salt market was. Mook explained that it was usually located in the very center of the marketplace. Despite the chaos, he admitted it felt refreshing to be back in town after so long, adding that it was far better than being stuck behind a desk doing paperwork. Master Su reminded him that he was still an inner disciple disguised as an estate steward. Mook acknowledged that fact and replied that staring at the situation would not change anything, so they might as well enjoy the scenery. Master Su noticed the look on Mook's face and asked what it meant. Mook answered that it meant the salt merchants ruled the entire marketplace. Looking ahead, he spotted a massive pile of salt sacks surrounded by heavy guards. At that moment, a plump, wealthy-looking merchant with a sleek ponytail and a smug smile noticed them, his eyes immediately lighting up. The merchant introduced himself as Kang Xian of Shanxi and welcomed the heroes of Wudong to the market. Master Su introduced himself in return as Chong Su, the head of Wudong's treasury pavilion. Kang Xian remarked that the Wudong disciples he had previously requested had already arrived safely. However, he asked what had brought someone as important as the treasury pavilion master there in person. Although he spoke politely, a smug grin spread across his face. Master Su explained that they had come to purchase salt. Although Wudong had declined the advance purchase agreement, they had never said they would not buy salt altogether. Kang Xian folded his arms and acted as though he were doing them an enormous favor simply by listening. He stated that if they wanted to buy now, the price could not be lowered by even a single coin. In fact, they would have to pay significantly more than the previous futures price. Master Su was left completely speechless. Before he could respond, Mu casually stepped forward with his hands behind his back and remarked that they would still be buying the salt cheaply. Kang Xian turned toward him in confusion and questioned what he meant. He asked whether Mook honestly believed he had revealed information out of simple generosity. Mook calmly replied that no merchant in the world ever gave something away for free. There was always a catch. Kang Xian's expression immediately grew uncertain. A sharp grin spread across Mook's face as he calmly asked whether the open center method was about to be abolished. Master Su was completely stunned. Grabbing Mook by both shoulders, he shook him violently and exclaimed that if the open center method were abolished, the price of salt would immediately fall to less than half its current value. He angrily accused Kang Xian of trying to squeeze outrageous profits out of the Wudong sect. Watching the reaction, Mook quietly admired how quickly the treasury pavilion master had calculated the consequences. Kang Xian hurriedly tried to calm the situation. He explained that the abolition of the open center method was still nothing more than a rumor circulating in Beijing. Since no official decision had been made, even he did not know the complete details. Furthermore, as long as the system remained in effect, he argued that he had not actually overcharged anyone because he was still selling at the current official market price. Mook agreed, pointing out that the system had not yet been officially abolished. Therefore, Kang Xian had technically done nothing wrong by selling at the legal market price. Master Su admitted that was true but remarked that Kang Xian could at least have warned them. Stepping closer to the merchant, Mook explained that openly spreading such rumors would only invite trouble from the imperial court. Regardless of how influential the Wudong sect might be, it would not escape punishment if it became entangled in political affairs. Besides, if customers were willing to pay premium prices, it was simply a merchant's responsibility to sell the goods. Master Su remained silent. Mook looked directly at the visibly panicked merchant and calmly asked whether there was truly nothing they could do for the time being. Kang Xian frantically nodded. Mook simply acknowledged the answer and suggested that they leave. He casually walked away, leaving both Master Su and Kang Xian standing there in complete confusion. As they continued walking through the marketplace, Master Su could no longer contain himself. He demanded to know what Mook had been thinking. He questioned why Mook had waited so long to reveal the information about the open center system, and wondered whether any future policy change would even apply retroactively. Mook explained that Master Su had been too busy trying to maintain a friendly relationship with the Shanxi merchant. As far as Kang Xian was concerned, Master Su would always be remembered as a loyal customer, whereas Mook had deliberately positioned himself as the one person willing to negotiate reasonably. When the real negotiations finally began, Kang Xian would naturally prefer dealing with him. Eventually, the two of them sat down at a small outdoor food stall. Master Su remarked that there must have been a reason the sect leader had sent Mook there instead of dispatching him somewhere like Dongbei. Mook simply confirmed that was exactly the case. The moment he finished speaking, Master Su's fist came down squarely on his head. After taking a sip of tea, Master Su grumbled that the boy possessed a once-in-a-generation talent for making people want to punch him. Mook casually picked up a steaming hot bun and remarked that a true merchant always knew exactly where to strike. Master Su snorted and replied that Mook was no merchant at all, but merely a troublesome little menace. He then asked what their next move would be. Taking a bite of the bun, Mook answered that they would simply wait. Since the market would continue for 4 days, there was no reason to act until then. Master Su asked what he intended to do during those 4 days. Mook casually replied that they could simply look around the market before suddenly trailing off. His eyes locked onto a colorful tonghalu stall filled with skewers of candied fruit. His face instantly lit up with childlike excitement as he clenched a fist enthusiastically. Master Su stared at him with a completely exhausted expression. Slowly clenching his own fist, he realized that another one of Mook's outrageous schemes had already begun taking shape. A bit later, Mook approached a cloth stall, and the shopkeeper welcomed him. As Mook checked the clothes, the shopkeeper said, "Isn't it incredibly soft? These are all certified as high grade by the market commissioner himself." Mook picked up one of the cloth samples and said, "Indeed, the quality is excellent." He then returned it to the shopkeeper and asked, "Do you mind if we look around a bit more?" The shopkeeper replied, "Oh, of course. But no matter where you go, nothing will compare to ours." Master Su watched him in confusion and asked Mook, "Are you really planning to just browse the market like this? If so, I'd rather go back to the inn and rest." Mook asked. "Didn't you notice it, Pavilion Lord?" Master Su asked. "Notice what?" Mook smiled and explained. "The market commissioner is a government official who manages the market. All goods in the market must first be certified by the market commissioner. Based on this quality, the market commissioner assigns the merchants their spots in the market. Of course, if the commissioner had taken bribes, he would have given low-quality goods a high grade, but that doesn't seem to be the case here. From what I can see, the market commissioner of this market is highly capable. He has a keen eye for quality, and he doesn't seem to sell grades for money." Mook then picked up a sword and observed it closely before saying to Master Su, "Please buy this for me." Master Su said, "Isn't that a rather expensive sword?" Mook said, "Think of it as an investment for our successful negotiation. I truly need it for the deal." Master Su let out a sigh, picked out some money, and gave it to Mook. With that money, Mook bought the sword. Mook moved away from the shop with a smile, and a bit later he turned to Master Su and said, "Let me ask you a question, Pavilion Lord. According to my explanation, this market's commissioner is capable and fair. Correct?" Master Su replied. "Yes," Mook said. "The shop where I bought this sword was certainly a good one, and in a prime location. Yet, it was also a mediocre shop that mixed high and low quality goods. To maximize the market's profitability, they should have placed the absolute best shop in such a spot. So why did the market commissioner make such an unprofitable decision?" Hearing that, Master Su became silent, unable to find an answer to Mook's question. Seeing that, Mook smiled, turned toward him, and extended the sword he had bought earlier while saying, "The clue is the person who made this sword." Master Su grabbed the sword and started examining it while saying, "It's certainly a fine sword, but the maker?" Then Master Su noticed the name Yi Zhang on the sword and became confused. Mook said, "He is Myong Han, a famous blacksmith active in Beijing. What is noteworthy is that he is from here, in Yichang." Master Su asked, "Are you saying the market commissioner is secretly giving Yichang merchants special treatment? If that's the case, he doesn't seem very fair." He then gave the sword back to Mook. Mook grabbed the sword while saying, "It's only human to show some favor to those from your hometown. Other merchants receive similar treatment in their own hometowns, after all. So, this sword will make the perfect gift for him. He has a keen eye, so he'll recognize its quality, and with his deep local patriotism, he'll highly value artisan Yi Zhang's name. Besides, a sword is highly valuable even as a mere ornament. It's sure to win us the market commissioner's favor." Master Su asked, "How can a Wudong disciple offer a bribe so boldly?" He then let out a sigh and said, "But you certainly have a knack for business." A bit later, Mook and Master Su arrived at the market commissioner's mansion. The market commissioner served them coffee with some snacks and said, "It is an honor to be visited by the head of Gakchen Pavilion of Wudong." As the market commissioner checked the sword given to him as a gift by Master Su, he recognized it and said, "This is a sword by the master craftsman Yi Zhang. He is famous even in Beijing, so this must have cost a fortune." Master Su replied, "Not at all. Since you do so much for us, Wudong must show at least this much sincerity." Mook said, "With all due respect, I will take over the discussion from here. Actually, it is about the price of salt." The market commissioner said, "I have already heard the news. It is because of the abolition of the gaijeng system, correct?" Mook said, "Indeed. As expected, you are well informed, Commissioner. I am relieved to hear you already know, the market commissioner said. Please do not worry. I have made sure to keep the brokers strictly in line. All of our brokers are Ichang natives, so their local patriotism is absolute. We cannot stand by and let our local market prices be disrupted. So Wudong has absolutely nothing to worry about. Hearing that, Mook smiled and thought. Market brokers act as intermediaries between local and visiting merchants. Even though they are all from the Central Plains, dialects, customs, and specific weights and measures are bound to differ. It was the broker's job to reconcile these differences in the market. If these brokers decided to make things difficult, the Shangxi merchants could try slipping them bribes, but with the Saisa taking that stance, even that is out of the question. At that moment, someone shouted outside, surprising Mook. The market commissioner opened the door and asked his servant, "What is going on?" The servant replied, "A merchant unhappy with the market conditions is causing a scene." The market commissioner turned to Mook and Master Su and said, "Please excuse me for a moment. I will be right back, so please make yourselves comfortable." Mook replied, "Understood." The market commissioner then shut the door. As the two remained in the room, Mook started whistling, and Master Su said, "Didn't I tell you it's best not to even mention the Gaijeng system?" Mook replied, "That just meant we shouldn't do it openly in public, since it's a problem for civilians like us to even know about it. Which means, looking at it another way, there's no issue if we let it slip indirectly. Many of Wudong's lay disciples work in the business world. Aren't they also a great asset to Wudong? Besides, this issue directly affects local interests. Once I dropped a hint, they all moved as one. Still, I didn't expect even the brokers to take action. If I'd known, I would have spent that bribe money on a better meal." At that moment, Master Su narrowed his eyes as he sensed something and stood up from his seat while saying, "Let's go. It seems things won't go entirely your way." Both of them immediately went outside, and Mook asked, "Why the sudden change?" Master Su said, "Look over there." Mook looked in the indicated direction. In confusion, he narrowed his eyes when he saw several familiar faces in the distance and thought, "I wondered what the commotion was about. What a persistent, annoying connection." Master Su asked, "Are those people causing a scene from an unorthodox sect?" Mook replied, "They may look like it, but they're actually from an orthodox sect." Master Su asked, "How do you know that?" Mook replied, "I spotted a familiar face." He then thought, "Sagon Hyan, so you've come to get in my way after all." Mook thought, "He left the academy right after his clash with Yeo Hongyang, didn't he? After seeing the Merchant King's son in action, it must have been hard for him to stay. Even if he tried to stay, Yeo Hongyang wouldn't have left him alone. But of all people, why is he the one guarding the Shangxi merchants? Talk about bad luck," Merchant Kong said to the market commissioner. "I'm telling you to know when to stop. Even if the night walkers look out for the local merchants, this is basically telling us not to do business at all." The market commissioner asked, "What on earth are you talking about? Why would we have any reason to interfere with you? Do you have any proof? Are you insulting an imperial official without any evidence? If so, are you prepared to face the consequences?" Kong became flustered by that and turned around, saying, "Fine, I see how it is. We Shangxi merchants have our own connections in the government. We'll handle the night walkers ourselves, finish the trade, and then we'll settle who's right and wrong later. By then, we won't be the ones at a disadvantage." He then started moving away. At that moment, Mook stopped him and said, "Wait a moment. If you do that, our local merchants might get ripped off, wouldn't they? I suggest you stick close to the night walkers." Merchant Kong immediately recognized Mook and said, "You're that Wudong lay disciple who said he'd buy salt for cheap. I suppose this is all the result of your meddling." Mook smiled and replied, "No, I have nothing to do with the market price. I'm not here on behalf of the Wudong sect either. I'm simply standing here as a fellow merchant. In fact, I'd like to ask the Shangxi merchants something. They say a merchant should seek profit through righteousness. So why are you using information from Beijing to inflict such heavy losses on the merchants of Yichang?" Hearing that, Merchant Kong gritted his teeth in anger. But before he could say anything, Sagon Hyan placed his hand on Merchant Kang's shoulder from behind and said, "Please calm down. I know him. Don't let his smooth talking get to you. Merchants have their own laws, don't they? If merchants settle it among themselves, neither the government nor the night walkers can interfere. Just stay calm. Isn't this exactly why I'm here? Hearing that, Merchant Kong let out a deep breath and calmed himself down before saying, In that case, let me propose a different way. A proxy war, Luke said. Very well. Since the Night Watch is here to witness, we can start immediately. Hearing that, Master Su muttered, A proxy war? What is that? Luke explained. A proxy war is a method used in the market when right and wrong, victim and perpetrator, are not clearly defined. Simply put, instead of wasting time arguing over who's right, they settle the dispute through a test of strength. But what exactly does strength mean to a merchant? Naturally, it's money. If you have money, you've surely hired skilled guards. Thus, merchants with deep pockets often made active use of this proxy war. And right now, quite obviously, I don't have a single pun to my name. Mook thought. These guys probably know that too. They're acting this way despite knowing I'm a secular disciple of Wudong. They must know I can't just borrow the sect's power for something like this. At that moment, Master Su said to Mook, I'll tell you this now, just in case. If you were counting on me to step in, forget it. He then turned to Merchant Kong and said, That goes for you too. Since the Wudong sect doesn't meddle in secular affairs, you know you can't use a Wudong guard for a proxy war, right? Merchant Kong said. Of course. How could we use a noble warrior of the Wudong sect for such a petty brawl? We've prepared our own guard for this very occasion. So do not worry. With that, Sagong stepped forward with a smile. The market commissioner became nervous and said to Mook, What will you do? I can stall for time if you need to find someone else. Mook replied. That's quite all right. A man must stand by his word. Since I came here as a merchant, I shall face them as a merchant. He stepped forward as well. Sagong, with a smug expression, said, So the opportunity finally presents itself. I've been dying to give you a proper beating, Mook Wai-yang. Mook replied. Is that so? Good for you. I felt the same way. Come on, give it your best shot. But before the proxy war could start between them, someone arrived and said to Sagong Hyan, Young sect leader. Sagong Hyan turned toward the voice, saw the person, and asked, What brings you all the way here? Hall leader Hong Munhak? Munhak said, I heard the young sect leader disappeared alone with the Shanxi merchants, so I came to check it out. Don't waste your energy on this. Leave it to me. As a hall leader of the Rising Thunder Gate, they won't dare object. Sagong replied. But that guy barely has any internal chi. Why use a butcher's cleaver to kill a mere chicken? Luke said to Sagong. Oh, I thought you were switching participants for a second. I thought you were running away because you were scared of me. Sagong replied. I'd never pass up a chance to beat you to a pulp. The market commissioner asked Mook. Are you sure about this? Your opponent is the young sect leader of the Rising Thunder Gate. He's not someone you can beat just because you're a decent street fighter. Mook replied. Don't worry. If it were that great warrior Hong Munhak, maybe things would be different. But against this guy? It'll be a breeze. The market commissioner let out a sigh of relief and muttered. I see. The market commissioner then raised his hand and announced. Then I shall now explain the terms of the proxy war. The losing side of the proxy war must grant unconditional concessions to the winner. If young Master Sagong Hyan wins, the Shanxi merchants may trade directly without the Night Walker's mediation. Conversely, if young Master Mook Wai-yang wins, the Shanxi merchants must follow the Night Walker's instructions without complaint. If there are no objections, let the proxy war begin. As he said that, Mook rushed forward at high speed while thinking. I let him strike first last time because I was flustered, but in a fight he who strikes first wins. However, his fist attack was blocked by Sagong with his sword, accompanied by a smug smile. Sagong swung his sword to attack Mook, but Mook immediately leaped backward and dodged the attack. Mook nervously muttered. Where did that sword come from? Isn't that cheating? Sagong rushed forward with his sword and said, We never said weapons were banned, so what's it to you? Besides, this has always been my weapon. I'll only use the flat of the blade, so don't worry about dying. If you have a problem, use a sword yourself. While dodging Sagong's sword attacks, Mook thought. What kind of nonsense is that? I've never even held a sword properly before. Mook continued dodging Sagong's attacks. Merchant Kong, seeing the fight, shouted. That's it. Just go ahead and break a few of his bones, the market commissioner said to Master Su. Shouldn't we stop this? If that young man is truly just a merchant, how can he face a martial artist? Master Su replied. He brought this on himself. Besides, if we stop the fight, wouldn't that mean our defeat? The Shangxi merchants deceiving the people of Yichang, the Shangxi merchants cheating the people of Yichang? I didn't get a chance to mention it, but he's also a disciple of our Wudang sect. It won't end easily, so just watch. At that moment, Sagong raised his sword and launched a vertical slash, which Mook easily dodged by stepping aside. Sagong asked, Is running away the only thing you've learned? You're still nothing but a little rat, Mook said. What are you even talking about? I've been training in martial arts for less than a year. Shouldn't you be ashamed that you can't even land a single hit on me? If someone like you is the young sect leader, the Rising Thunder Gates level is obvious. Hearing that, Sagong's face turned red with anger. Mook thought, I talked big, but the truth is, I was in a pretty tight spot. Even at the last evaluation, Sagong Hyan was someone I couldn't land a proper blow on. If all I had right now was agile movements, I would have just stalled for time before taking a clean hit and losing miserably, just like before. But things are different now. Sagong gritted his teeth in anger, and seeing his furious expression, Munhak shouted, Young sect leader! Control your temper! However, in his anger, Sagong rushed forward, swung his blade, and launched a vertical slash, which Mook dodged. Mook immediately turned around and launched a fist attack while thinking. Because now, I have tough physique, a skill I bought for 2 silver taels. The attack struck Sagong, sending him into the air before his unconscious body fell to the ground. Mook thought, it was useless when I got acupoint stimulation from Changhua, but that was an exception. I can beat someone like Sagong Hyan without a single scratch. Standing above the unconscious Sagong, Mook asked the market commissioner, Shall we continue? The market commissioner recovered from his surprise at Mook's attack and announced, The winner of the proxy war is Mook Yang. As previously agreed, the Shangxi merchants can no longer drive out the local vendors. This is the result of a proxy war you all agreed to. As merchants who value credit, I expect you to accept this gracefully. A few days later, the salt trade venture came to a successful conclusion. The leader of the Wudang sect, Chong Yui, called both Mook and Master Su to his office and said to Mook, This is incredible. To think that even by the standards of an advance purchase, you managed to save 300 silver taels. Thought that no matter how shrewd the Shangxi merchants were, carrying that much salt to another market would be too much of a burden. In the end, they had no choice but to sell the salt in Yichang, and they could not charge him a high price. The result was a massive discount of 300 silver taels. Chong Yui told Mook that, as promised, his 5-pun share was 15 silver taels. Mook kissed the bag of coins while thinking that Wudang's payments were as generous as expected. Chong Yui continued that what was truly surprising was the details. Although Sagong Hyan was Mook's age, he was the young sect leader of a respectable sect. For Mook to defeat him after being at Wudang for less than a year was something to be proud of. It seemed Changhwa's eye for talent had been correct. Therefore, although it was highly unusual, Chong Yui intended to grant Mook a special privilege. Master Su became surprised and asked whether Chong Yui truly meant what he was saying. Chong Yui announced that, as of that day, Mook Yang was officially registered as a disciple of the main mountain. He acknowledged that Mook must have been surprised, as no secular disciple had been promoted to the main mountain for nearly 50 years. However, Mook had done an excellent job and proven his talent, so he should take pride in being a member of Wudang. Mook remained silent for a moment before asking whether Chong Yui could grant him one request. Chong Yui readily agreed to grant anything within his power. Mook then requested that Chong Yui grant him expulsion without destroying his dantian. The request shocked Chong Yui, while Master Su became flustered and thought that Mook was at it again. Mook explained that he wanted to make money. Chong Yui repeated the word in disbelief, asking if Mook wanted to make money. Mook affirmed that he really liked money. Chong Yui explained that a Taoist should distance himself from the secular world, but he did not believe making money was inherently bad. However, Mook had already learned the Blue Cloud steps. No sect in the world would simply expel someone who had learned its secret arts. It was only natural to destroy such a disciple's dantian or, at the very least, sever his tendons. Chong Yui admitted that he had never anticipated a situation like this and was quite perplexed. After thinking for a while, Chong Yui came up with an idea and asked Mook how he felt about becoming a registered secular disciple. Mook became confused and asked what a registered secular disciple was. Chong Yui explained that originally, all main mountain disciples of Wudang had their names recorded in the Patriarch Hall registry. This was a ritual to present a disciple to the heavens, a tradition that had continued since the sect founder's time. Because their names were recorded, it was called being registered. In short, a registered disciple was essentially a main mountain disciple. Mook would be registered while remaining a secular disciple, which was why it was called a registered secular disciple. Fortunately, there was a precedent. In the past, when the demonic cult rose to power, the Central Plains lacked the forces to fight back. Wudang and the other sects of that era had therefore bolstered their strength through the registered secular disciple system. Mook pointed out that the system was from over 100 years ago, and asked what would actually change for him if he became one. Chong Yui explained that a registered secular disciple could learn Wudang's martial arts. Of course, such a disciple would also have a duty to answer Wudang's summons, but there was absolutely no coercion involved. Mook was surprised by the revelation and thought that such an arrangement was actually possible. He could remain a secular disciple while also becoming a registered disciple of Wudang. He could use Wudang's name for influence while fully enjoying the freedom of a secular disciple. Seeing Mook become excited, Master Su interrupted him and brought him back to the present. Mook calmed himself and thought that doing business under Wudang's name was an entirely different matter. What mattered right now was that he could learn the martial arts of a registered secular disciple while still engaging in trade. That alone made becoming a registered secular disciple incredibly advantageous. Mook excitedly agreed to become a registered secular disciple. Chong Yui raised his hand and stopped Mook mid-sentence before explaining that the system had only been used during the rise of the demonic cult. Since he might be setting a bad precedent, he could not make the decision on his own. Therefore, he would bring the matter before the Elder Council, but not immediately. He would give Mook a 3-month grace period. Chong Yui explained that every elder would oppose the idea at that moment because it would appear to be nothing more than special treatment. Therefore, during those 3 months, Mook needed to give the elders a reason they could not dispute. Mook became nervous and asked what would happen if he failed. Chong Yui explained that Mook would either become a main mountain disciple or have his dantian destroyed and leave. Some time later, Mook returned to the training arena, where Master Hua smiled upon seeing him training. Master Hua said that he had heard what happened in Ichang, and was glad that he had recommended Mook to the sect leader. With such martial talent, it was a wonder that Mook had not caught Wudang's attention sooner. According to Master Hua, Mook had truly been destined to become a main mountain disciple of Wudang. Mook, who was carrying a huge rock on his back, thought that Master Hua was a bit too excited. He was glad that he had kept the registered secular disciple matter a secret, as he could only imagine what kind of fuss Master Hua would have made if he had heard about it. A bit later, Mook placed the rock on the floor and announced that he was done after 20 repetitions. Master Hua explained that, at first, even moving once had been exhausting and Mook had struggled greatly. However, his adaptability was truly remarkable. Now that his skeletal structure had settled, it was time for him to hold a sword. Master Hua said that he would go get a wooden sword and instructed Mook to clean up while he was gone. Mook picked up the rock and started moving away while thinking that Master Hua talked about his skeletal structure, but it was really all thanks to his tough physique. He wondered if he was finally graduating from physical training. He placed the rock aside and continued thinking that, more importantly, he needed to prove his worth to the Elder Council. Simply put, to justify becoming a registered disciple, he needed to demonstrate martial talent. To justify remaining a secular disciple, he also needed to prove his commercial acumen. As for commercial acumen, Mook had had something in mind for a long time, so that would not be too difficult. The problem was proving his martial talent. He wondered what he could possibly do when he was only beginning to learn the sword. Then he realized that Wudang was a sword sect, after all, and what mattered was that he was finally learning Wudang's peerless swordplay. Mook picked up the wooden sword that Master Hua had given him and continued thinking about all these matters. Seeing Mook deep in thought, Master Hua struck him on the head with his sword and told him that he had too many stray thoughts. He then announced that Mook would learn the 3 talents sword art that day. Mook asked whether the 3 talents sword art was not simply a common sword art that could be found anywhere on the streets, joking that he could probably buy a manual for 3 copper coins. Master Hua explained that the 3 talents sword art Mook was about to learn was different. Mook asked how exactly it was different. Master Hua pointed at Mook and explained that it was not for him to tell Mook how it was different. Mook had to make it different himself. Mook asked Master Hua to stop speaking in riddles. Master Hua remarked that people usually understood when he said that much. Mook's talent was great, but his comprehension was lacking, which was lamentable. He then asked whether Mook knew the stances of the 3 talents sword art. Mook replied that he knew them as a matter of common sense. The vertical slash was Mount Tai Press, the diagonal slash was 8 directional storm, and the horizontal slash was sweeping 1,000 armies. Master Hua acknowledged that Mook knew them well. He then decided to make things simple by instructing Mook to swing each stance 10,000 times. That, he declared, was the special 3 talents sword art he would teach Mook. Hearing that, Mook became angry and shouted that 10,000 swings had to be some kind of joke. He complained that Master Hua should not say whatever he wanted simply because he was not the one doing it. Master Hua explained that he had done it, as had every other disciple on the main mountain. It did not matter whether Mook was fast or slow, as long as he focused on completing the count. With that, Master Hua leaped away and said he would return later. Mook shouted for him to wait. Mook wondered why Master Hua always left immediately after saying his piece. However, he decided to stay positive. He only had to reach the required number, so he planned to swing half-heartedly and get it over with. With that, Mook raised his sword and swung it vertically. Mook's goal was to complete 10,000 vertical slashes, 10,000 horizontal slashes, and 10,000 diagonal slashes. After making several more swings, Mook became flustered and wondered how long 10,000 swings were going to take. Some time later, Mook dropped his wooden sword to the ground and collapsed beside it while taking deep breaths. He could not believe that he had actually completed the training. He finally realized that even repetitive training required a certain level of talent, even if it was only the 3 talents sword art. Completing 10,000 swings with proper form had been no easy feat. His body kept becoming stiff, causing his form to fall apart. With only the 2 talents he possessed, he simply could not maintain the proper form. Then, a system window had suddenly appeared beside him, offering him the chance to purchase the 20 silver tail sword talent, the lowest grade, for only 10 silver tails. It would have been impossible without the half-off discount. Of the 15 silver taels he had earned from scraping by in the Icheng market, 2/3 had gone toward purchasing the talent. Mook then gently swung his sword vertically up and down and thought that, at least, the count still increased even when he swung it like this. After completing those 1,000 swings and purchasing the sword talent, the difference was like night and day, even though it was only the lowest grade. He wondered whether he now had to perform 10,000 swings again, but questioned whether there was really any point in swinging the 3 talents sword art 10,000 times. Master Hua, who was watching Mook from a nearby roof, observed him gently swinging his sword and thought that he had believed Mook was finally getting serious lately. However, the moment Master Hua looked away, Mook had gone right back to fooling around. Master Hua wondered what he was going to do with him. With that thought, Master Hua approached Mook and told him that it was enough. Even if Mook thought no one was watching, his current behavior was taking his fooling around a bit too far. Mook asked in surprise whether Master Hua had been watching him. Master Hua explained that he was worried about Mook and that, at this rate, Mook would not even be able to participate in the evaluation match. Mook became curious and asked what the evaluation match was. Seeing his curiosity, a smile appeared on Master Hua's face as he explained that it was a friendly sparring match among the 3rd-generation disciples. It was held to assess their skills and encourage healthy competition during training. Master Hua then asked whether it sparked Mook's competitive spirit. Mook became confused by Master Hua's pressure and claimed that he was definitely boiling with passion. He then asked whether the other elders would also be there to watch. Master Hua replied that they most likely would, as they would want to see the future of Wudong for themselves. Mook thought that it was perfect and that the evaluation match would be the best opportunity to prove his martial talent. He excitedly declared that he wanted to participate as well. Master Wa immediately replied that he could not. Mook was shocked and asked whether it was because he was older than the other third-generation disciples. Master Wa struck him on the head with the wooden sword and told him not to talk nonsense. He asked whether Mook wanted to make a fool of himself, explaining that if Mook wanted to enter the evaluation match, he had to at least master the 3 talents sword art. Mook realized that he really had to complete those 10,000 swings. He immediately assumed a position to swing his sword and asked when the evaluation match would take place. Master Wa replied that he believed there was about a month left. Mook thought that 10,000 swings in a month were not impossible, but he wondered whether he could truly demonstrate his martial talent with only that. Meanwhile, Master Wa thought that Mook's training results fluctuated wildly depending on his mood. Mook was capable of performing a decent vertical slash, yet he kept doing inexplicable and bizarre things. Master Wa suspected that Mook was the type who could not stay focused on one thing. If he left Mook to learn on his own, he might stray down the wrong path. As he thought this, Master Wa struck Mook on the back with his wooden sword. Mook immediately turned around and asked what that was for. Master Wa told Mook to take the training seriously. Swinging recklessly would not help, even if he did it 10,000 times. Master Wa then said that he would fix Mook's basic form. Mook replied that he could do it on his own. Master Wa instructed Mook to start by spreading his feet shoulder-width apart to find his balance. He then told Mook to focus his strength in his dantian, grip the sword gently, and strike down in a single, fluid motion. Mook followed all of Master Wa's instructions and struck downward. He was surprised by the result and thought that, even considering his sword talent, the movement felt completely different from before. He wondered if this was what it truly meant to use a sword. While Mook was lost in thought, Master Wa interrupted him and asked whether he still wanted to keep flailing around on his own. Mook turned his attention back to his strikes and told Master Wa to do whatever he wanted, Jinrin. The scene shifted to 1 month later, when Mook was sitting on the floor of the training arena with a smile. Master Wa arrived and remarked that Mook seemed to be in high spirits. He then asked whether Mook had finished his warm-up. Mook replied that he had not, and asked Master Wa to come back in half an hour. Master Wa told him that if he had time for jokes, he had time to pick up his sword. Mook agreed and immediately picked up his sword. Mook glanced at Master Wa and thought that, when he thought about it, Master Wa was quite something. Despite having other disciples to look after, he had stayed by Mook's side for 5 straight days to coach him. Mook was certain that Master Wa did not actually have the time for this. He wondered whether Master Wa was simply trying to get his money's worth after teaching him, or whether there was some other reason. Master Wa asked Mook what he was doing and told him to start swinging. Mook replied that he was doing it, and asked Master Wa not to rush him. Mook thought that Chong Wa was indeed the one who had finally gotten him started with the sword, and he intended to show Master Wa the results. With that, Mook immediately assumed a stance and launched a vertical strike, followed by a horizontal strike and then several diagonal strikes in an instant with remarkable speed. Mook then sheathed his sword with a smug expression and glanced toward Master Wa, expecting praise. Instead, Master Wa asked what Mook was looking at. Mook asked whether that was all and whether Master Wa had nothing else to say, such as how decent Mook had become, or how solid his basics were. Master Wa sighed and explained that he had only been joking. Mook finally looked the part, and he had truly changed. Master Wa could hardly believe that Mook had trained without distraction even when left alone. Mook said that he had simply had some sort of realization. He then asked whether he was good enough for the evaluation match now. Hearing that, Master Wa moved to the side and announced that they would have one final test. Mook asked what the test was. Master Wa moved toward a nearby bush, broke off a small branch, and raised it into the air. He then instructed Mook to withstand 10 of his strikes using the wooden sword while Master Wa used only the branch. With that, Master Wa returned to the center of the training ground and stood in front of Mook, preparing to begin the test. Mook immediately charged forward and launched a strike, acknowledging the start of the exchange. Master Wa easily blocked the attack and evaluated Mook's decision to force the exchange on his own terms, noting that such a tactic only worked when their skills were on par. Master Wa then swung the twig and blocked Mook's sword, sending him flying backwards. Mook quickly regained his footing. Master Wa immediately charged forward, closing the distance in an instant, and launched another strike, which Mook blocked with his sword. With a smile, Master Wa announced the beginning of the second exchange. Mook remained nervous. He had expected Master Wa to go easy on him because he was using a twig, but he understood that lowering his guard would be fatal. He also began to realize what Chonghua was trying to accomplish. The two continued exchanging strikes. While blocking the attacks, Mook recognized the diagonal slash as the 8-directional storm, the horizontal slash as sweeping 1,000 armies, and the vertical slash as Mount Tai Press. He realized that Chonghua was testing whether he had truly achieved mastery of the 3 talents sword art. With the 10th and final exchange approaching, Mook focused entirely on blocking the attack. Master Wa suddenly changed his momentum and launched another strike, warning Mook not to let his body freeze simply because it was the final exchange. Mook became nervous upon realizing that Master Wa had suddenly used a variation technique. He considered it unfair. The strike landed and caused an energy explosion. As the dust settled, Master Wa was surprised to see that the twig in his hand had broken from the impact. Mook had barely managed to block the attack. Master Wa was impressed that Mook had managed to react to the strike. Mook chuckled and proudly considered himself to have passed the test after blocking 10 exchanges from a Jinren. Master Wa smiled and questioned whether Mook would still claim to have blocked the attack if he had been using an iron sword. Mook then wished he had more time to adapt to the sword talent of his current body. Master Wa sighed and turned around, explaining that even if Mook had passed the test, he still would not have been able to participate in the evaluation match. Mook became confused and asked for an explanation. Master Wa moved to the side of the training area, threw the twig into the bushes, and explained that only main mountain disciples could participate in the evaluation match. Mook remained confused by the revelation. Sometime later, the two arrived at the arena grounds, where Mook sat beside Master Wa in the audience section, visibly flustered. Master Wa asked whether Mook was still sulking. Mook admitted that he was, blaming a certain someone for making him work so hard toward a useless goal. Master Wa clarified that when he had said Mook would not be able to enter the evaluation match, he had meant that Mook could not participate if he remained a lay disciple. He pointed out that Mook had misunderstood him, and was now glaring at him unfairly. Mook gritted his teeth in frustration, recognizing that Master Wa always seemed to have an answer for everything. Mook then questioned why Master Wa had brought him there if he could not participate in the evaluation match. Master Wa explained that although Mook was brimming with confidence after achieving mastery of the 3 talents sword art, he believed Mook was looking down on Wudong's 3rd-generation disciples too much. Mook argued that this was actually Master Wa looking down on him and questioned whether he truly believed Mook would lose to the 3rd-generation disciples. Master Wa narrowed his eyes and instructed Mook to watch the sparring match closely. Mook watched 2 young disciples sparring. One of them struggled to block the other disciple's attacks. After being overwhelmed by the previous attacks, the struggling disciple was struck again and defeated easily. The victorious disciple immediately unsheathed his sword. Master Wa pointed toward the winner and explained that he was the disciple carrying the highest expectations among the 3rd-generation disciples. He described the boy as honest and straightforward while possessing absolutely no openings. He was the sect leader's disciple and was praised as the greatest talent among the 3rd-generation disciples, Yahello. Sometime later, the two left the arena. While they were leaving, Master Wa asked Mook what he thought after seeing Yahello with his own eyes. Mook acknowledged that Yahello's skills were incredible. His swordplay and footwork were on a completely different level from Mook's own. If Mook trained normally, it would take years, perhaps even longer, to catch up. This made Mook wonder whether the elders would really go out of their way to use the registered secular disciple system just to keep him when a monster like Yahello already stood among the main mountain disciples. Master Wa glanced at Mook as he remained deep in thought, and explained that gaining the elders' recognition would require him to defeat someone of Yahello's caliber. He then questioned whether Mook believed he could accomplish it. Mook resolved that whether it was possible or not, he had to do it. There was no other way to prove his innocence within the remaining time. Mook suddenly realized something and asked Master Wa how he knew that Mook needed to gain the elders' recognition. Master Wa remained silent for a moment before explaining that he had heard everything from the sect leader, including Mook's desire to take on the unusual status of a registered secular disciple. Mook pointed out that the sect leader had been the one to suggest it first. Master Hua explained that he also intended to compromise as much as possible regarding Mook's status. Having someone with Mook's martial talent in Wudang would be beneficial to the sect. However, he believed Mook already understood that, as he was now, he could not defeat Manhwa. Although Mook possessed talent, he was no longer young. If his talent could not even surpass Manhwa's, the elders would have no reason to make an exception to keep him. In that case, Mook would naturally become a main mountain disciple, and Master Hua questioned what he planned to do then. Mook accepted that he would have no choice. He placed a hand over his chest and stated that he would have to destroy his dantian and leave. Master Hua became angry for a moment upon hearing this, but eventually sighed and calmed down. He remarked on how resolute Mook was and jokingly suggested that anyone would think becoming a merchant was his heavenly calling. Mook nervously chuckled and admitted that the statement was not entirely wrong. However, he did not want to destroy his dantian so easily, explaining that to a merchant, money was as essential as food, water, and salt. Master Hua asked what Mook was trying to imply. Mook extended his hand and requested the return of the 100 copper coins he had previously left in Master Hua's possession. Some time later, Mook sat on a bench near the training arena and checked the martial arts skills displayed in the bamboo scroll system window. He calculated that his current total assets amounted to 6 silver coins. Of the 15 silver coins he had received from the sect leader previously, he had spent 10 at the Muji store, leaving 5, and had gathered enough scraps to make 1 more. He also expected to receive another 100 coins from Changhua for the grass whistles, but that was all he had. Even if he gathered all of it, it would not amount to 1 silver coin. With such limited funds, he needed to prepare a trump card capable of defeating Manhwa, but finding one was proving more difficult than expected. Any decent martial art or talent required an astronomical amount of silver, while anything cheap would be useless against Manhwa. Mook wondered where he could obtain more money. As Mook pondered his situation, Master Hua approached and threw a money bag toward him. Mook caught it in confusion and asked what it was. Master Hua explained that it contained the 100 coins Mook had previously left with him, along with additional money as interest for keeping them. Mook opened the bag and checked its contents. He was astonished that a few coins had somehow turned into a pile of silver, and questioned why Master Hua was giving it to him. Master Hua remained silent and looked toward the sky before explaining that he had already warned Mook that he did not believe he could defeat Manhwa. If Mook failed, his dantian would be destroyed and he would have to leave Wudang. Master Hua felt that his own greed in trying to bring Mook into Wudang could result in Mook losing his dantian for nothing, so he considered the money compensation. He estimated it to be around 100 silver coins and suggested that Mook use it as business capital. Mook remained silent for a moment before questioning whether such a large fortune was appropriate for a Wudang Taoist. Master Hua explained that it was his entire fortune. During his travels through the martial world, people he had helped often sent him money. He had kept saving the things that were difficult to report to the Gakchen Pavilion, and before he realized it, the amount had accumulated to that level. He added that even when purchasing grass whistles for the disciples, he now had to obtain money from the Gakchen Pavilion, which he found troublesome. Mook tied the bag of coins and hung it around his waist. He expressed sympathy for Master Hua's situation, but made it clear that he had no intention of returning money that was already in his possession. Master Hua explained that he had not expected Mook to return it. He then asked whether Mook felt better now that he had received money, reminding him that Mook had once said a merchant's food was money. He wondered if Mook could now feel energy welling up inside him. Mook moved away while proudly claiming that he felt as though he possessed the strength of a tiger. A few days later, Manhwa practiced his sword technique against the wooden log at the training ground with a wooden sword. Someone clapped from behind after witnessing his sword strikes. Manhwa stopped and turned around, discovering that the person clapping was Mook. Mook complimented Manhwa, saying that although he had seen him during the evaluation match, he appeared much more impressive up close. Manhwa noticed Mook's outfit and questioned whether he was a lay disciple. Mook clarified that he was Mook Young, a temporary main sect disciple, and explained that he had come because he wanted to spar with Manhwa. Mael turned around and told Mook to leave because he had to train. Mook sighed and deliberately provoked him by implying that Mael was forfeiting. He explained that he currently needed the elder's recognition and mockingly thanked Mael for admitting defeat first. He then pointed out their age difference and suggested that he understood why Mael was afraid. Mook approached Mael and whispered that he would not spread rumors about Mael chickening out. Angered by the provocation, Mael immediately turned toward a nearby instructor and requested that the instructor act as referee. The instructor gladly agreed. Mael took a breath to calm himself and warned Mook that he would make him regret provoking him. Mook responded with a smile and told him to suit himself. A short while later, both picked up wooden swords and moved to the center of the arena. The instructor asked whether they were ready. Both immediately assumed their fighting stances and confirmed that they were ready. The instructor gave the signal to begin. Both fighters charged toward each other, and their wooden swords clashed. The impact pushed both of them backwards. Mael quickly regained his footing, tightened his grip around his sword, and launched another attack. Mook raised his sword and blocked the attack, but Mael continued launching one strike after another. Mook assessed the situation. Mael's attacks were simple yet overwhelming. The speed advantage that had been Mook's only advantage was gradually disappearing. If the battle continued this way, Mook would easily lose. Mael had already adapted to his movements. Because Mook was struggling so much to block the attacks, Mael would never suspect that Mook was concealing his true strength. Mook then considered the possibility of suddenly gaining a new talent during the battle. Although someone could not normally transform in the middle of a fight, such a sudden change would undoubtedly throw Mael off. Mook realized that he had only one opportunity to attempt it. Mook immediately summoned the bamboo scroll window and selected the skill he had decided on earlier. The money in his bag was consumed in the process. Mook resolved to spend every last coin. With a smile, Mook charged forward to attack, confusing Mael with his sudden change in behavior. At that moment, Mook became confused when the bamboo scroll window appeared before him and displayed a message stating that he had exceeded the equipable talent limit. Sometime earlier, as the sparring match between Mook and Mael began, Mael's fellow students watched from the sidelines. The student with the ponytail hairstyle wondered about Mael's decision to accept the sparring match despite the obvious difference in skill. He found it unbelievable that Mael had fallen for such provocation. Song explained that Mael must have been holding a lot inside. The rumors about Mook Young, a secular disciple, challenging him had likely been eating away at him. As the sect leader's disciple and the rumored next owner of the Taiji Wisdom Sword, Mael was already under pressure to watch his every step. He likely hated being compared to someone like Mook. Song also considered that everyone knew Mael worshipped their master, Jinren Chonghua. Perhaps Mael felt threatened because Master Hua had been focusing so much on Mook lately. Back in the sparring match, both fighters charged toward each other. Mook became confused when the bamboo scroll window appeared and displayed a message stating that he had exceeded the maximum number of equipable talents. Having already planned his move, Mook immediately rolled across the ground to dodge Mael's sword attack. Mael mocked Mook's movement as something expected from a secular disciple and criticized its lack of elegance. Mook chuckled and jokingly referred to the movement as a more elegant, lazy donkey roll. He then glanced at the system window and wondered what had just happened, as he had never seen such a bamboo scroll message before. The bamboo scroll window displayed another message explaining that Mook had exceeded the maximum number of equipable talents and needed to purchase an additional talent slot or replace one of his currently equipped talents. Mook gritted his teeth in frustration after realizing that he had just spent every last penny he possessed and now needed to purchase something else. Mael approached Mook and launched a vertical slash. Mook immediately leaped backwards and dodged the attack. Mook realized that although he could purchase additional talents, there was a limit to how many he could equip. His original plan had been to stack low-grade talents to become stronger efficiently, but the new restriction left him with no choice. He immediately unequipped agile movements and equipped the martial talent he had just purchased, swift movements, 7th class. As the new talent took effect, a smile appeared on Mook's face. His body felt incredibly light, convincing him that the 100 taels had been well spent. Meanwhile, Il immediately rushed forward to attack. Mook wished he had time to become accustomed to his new talent, but Il was not going to give him that luxury. Mook therefore decided to move at full speed from the very beginning. As Mook attempted to dash forward, he flipped through the air and landed on his head. Il became slightly nervous upon witnessing the sudden movement, and turned toward Mook, who was lying on the ground. The student with the ponytail hairstyle assumed that Mook had been too eager, and had made a clumsy mistake. He then sought Myung-song's agreement. Myung-song, however, was surprised by the speed Mook had displayed. Although tripping over his own feet was ridiculous, the speed had been almost too fast for him to track. He could not understand what had happened to Mook. Meanwhile, Mook got back on his feet and cleared his nose. When he noticed Il attacking again, Mook immediately raised his sword and blocked the attack. Il realized that Mook had been hiding his strength. Mook countered by accusing Il of doing the same and expressed disbelief that Il had managed to keep up with his absolute top speed. Mook swung his sword and pushed Il back with the force of the strike. Il nervously wondered whether Mook had been testing him the entire time. Mook then rushed forward at high speed to attack. Il recognized that Mook's incredible speed explained his confidence. However, he still believed he could win if that was Mook's maximum speed. He attributed his previous hesitation to being caught off guard by Mook's sudden burst of speed and believed he could easily handle that level of speed. As a main mountain disciple of the Wudang sect, he considered himself completely different from Mook. Il became nervous for a moment as he observed Mook's speed and recalled Master Hwa asking about his recent training. Il raised his sword to attack Mook, determined not to lose to a mere secular disciple. When Il launched a vertical slash, Mook disappeared from his position. Il became nervous after realizing that Mook had become even faster. He could not understand how Mook could have claimed earlier that his previous speed was his maximum. Mook suddenly appeared in front of Il and landed a sword strike. Il coughed and fell to the ground. The other students were shocked by the result. The instructor announced that the sparring match was over and declared secular disciple Mook Young the winner. Il lay on the ground in tears and accused Mook of lying and cheating because the speed he had just displayed clearly had not been his top speed. Mook apologized but remarked that adults were naturally full of tricks. The next day, Master Hwa questioned Mook about how he had managed to defeat Il. Mook nervously attributed the victory to simply being stronger, and began whistling. Master Hwa sighed and accepted that a victory was still a victory. He then explained that news of Mook's victory over Il had already spread throughout the Wudang sect. Even the elders would have no choice but to acknowledge Mook's martial talent. However, Master Hwa explained that martial talent alone did not guarantee Mook would become a registered secular disciple. He suggested that if Mook had anything else to demonstrate before the Elders' Council, it would be best to reveal everything. Mook explained that there was no need to worry because he had already planned to prove his commercial acumen alongside his martial talent. Master Hwa questioned whether proving commercial acumen would take much longer than proving martial talent. Mook chuckled and explained that it would not. He only needed to borrow the Wudang sect's name for a while. Mook then proposed starting a business with Master Hwa. Sometime later, at Gakchen Pavilion, Mook explained his business idea to Master Su. Master Su expressed uncertainty about whether Wudang acting as a guarantor and broker would actually generate profit. Mook responded with confidence and insisted that it would. Master Su questioned the idea, pointing out that direct transactions were cheaper and wondering why merchants would go through Wudang and pay additional fees. Mook explained that Master Su underestimated how difficult life was for small merchants. People without martial arts knowledge considered the Central Plains a terrifying place because countless thugs would rob merchants as soon as they saw their goods. Merchants therefore lived in constant fear of being robbed. Mook proposed that the Wudang sect step in to solve this problem. As a prestigious Orthodox sect, Wudang could protect merchants' goods for a small fee. This would allow Wudang to gain the honor of protecting commoners while giving merchants the practical benefit of guaranteed safety. The goods could simply be stored in Wudang's warehouse and released when needed, while transaction fees would provide additional revenue. Mook considered it a perfect win-win business. Master Su acknowledged that the plan was certainly possible but remained uncertain about whether it would actually work. A few days later, at Wudong Brokerage, a large crowd of merchants had gathered and formed a line to enter. Chong Yui arrived and observed the crowd, remarking that the business seemed to be doing much better than expected. Master Su agreed. Chong Yui noted that only a little over 10 days had passed and asked whether the business had already generated any profit. Master Su calculated the revenue up to the previous day and reported that they had made approximately 200 silver taels. Chong Yui was astonished. He calculated that 200 taels in 10 days would amount to roughly 600 taels per month, equivalent to around 1,800 bags of salt. He then confirmed that the business had been Mook Wai-yang's idea. Master Su confirmed it. Although he had initially been skeptical, he admitted that Mook clearly had a talent for making money. He then informed Chong Yui that their guest was waiting inside and invited him to enter. Chong Yui agreed. A short while later, Sun Yan Yui, the representative of the Huizhou merchants, expressed his gratitude to Chong Yui. He explained that thanks to Wudong, merchants could now conduct business peacefully and believed this would elevate Hubei to the next level. Chong Yui acknowledged his statement. Yan Yui praised the business as something only Wudong could have accomplished, and expressed his hope that it would continue for a long time. Chong Yui assured him that Wudong intended to keep the business running for as long as possible. Yan Yui then picked up a wooden box and revealed that the Huizhou merchants had prepared a small gift as a gesture of gratitude. He opened the box and revealed a pill inside, surprising Chong Yui. Yan Yui identified it as the Heavenly King Divine Pill. He explained that there had once been a sect called the Heavenly King sect near Lake Qinghai. It had been a quiet and largely unknown place until the sect suddenly dissolved 10 years earlier, causing countless people to search for its legendary elixir. The Heavenly King Divine Pill had been reserved exclusively for the direct descendants of the Heavenly King sect. Rumors claimed that its medicinal efficacy rivaled the Great Restoration Pill of the Shaolin Temple. However, 10 years had passed without anyone finding the pill, and its whereabouts had seemingly disappeared into history. Yan Yui explained that he could not reveal how the Huizhou merchants had acquired it. Regardless of the circumstances, he believed that if the pill could help raise another pillar of the Central Plains, it would also be a blessing for commoners like them. He urged Chong Yui to accept it without hesitation. Chong Yui explained that Wudong normally did not accept such gifts, but the future of the young disciples was always on his mind. He therefore decided not to reject the sincerity of the Huizhou merchants, and accepted the gift with gratitude. Yan Yui expressed his own gratitude for Chong Yui accepting it. Chong Yui privately reflected on the situation. He had never imagined that Wai Yang's business would have such a profound impact on the commoners. He became increasingly eager for the Elders' Council scheduled for that day. On the day of the Elders' Council, the scene shifted to Samcheong Hall. Mook stood inside Samcheong Hall and reflected on how frequently he had been ending up there compared to his past life. Standing before so many elders was something he had never experienced in his previous life. Mook also noticed Chong Yu and wondered why he was there. He realized that Chong Yu was actually a Wudong elder, and regretted not knowing this earlier. He considered whether extorting 2 silver taels from him through a staged accident scam might have been excessive. At that moment, Chong Yui coughed and announced the beginning of the council regarding whether Mook Wai-yang should be granted the status of a registered secular disciple. He invited anyone with an opinion to speak first. Chong Yu immediately stood and opposed granting Mook the status of a registered secular disciple. Although he acknowledged Mook's talent, he argued that granting such status too freely could establish a bad precedent. The brown-haired elder questioned how granting the status to a single disciple could be considered handing it out freely, and argued that it was unlikely to cause any harm. The red-haired elder countered that the registered secular disciple system was a special system that had only been used during the rise of the demonic cult. He feared that it could make Main Mountain disciples yearn for secular freedom while tempting secular disciples to covet Wudong's martial arts. The brown-haired elder argued that even so, Wudong could not force someone to remain if that person wished to leave. Chong Yu responded that they should simply let Mook leave. The other elders continued discussing the matter. They acknowledged that the council was being held because Mook's talent was too exceptional to simply let go. They questioned when Wudong had ever clung to a single talent, yet admitted that both Mook's martial talent and commercial acumen were extraordinary. Chong Yui eventually stopped the discussion and declared that it would be better to proceed directly to a vote. However, Because the council concerned Mook's future, he decided to grant Mook one final opportunity to persuade the elders and asked whether disciple Mook Y Young wished to speak. A smile appeared on Mook's face as he accepted the opportunity. Mook had grown tired of merely listening and considered the opportunity perfect for him. In his past life, he had sold thousands upon thousands of goods, making this kind of situation ideal. With his experience, he believed he could easily market a product as valuable as himself. Mook respectfully clasped his hands before the elders and prepared to begin his statement, as lay disciple Mook Y Young. Genius protagonists, overwhelming growth, and legendary battles, this is your battlefield. We're just steps away from 20,000 subscribers. Subscribe now and rise with us.